this is a book review, but it's gonna be, that's Discord. This is gonna be a weird kind of book review, and I painted my nails, yay! They're orange. They're just drying. But anyway, this is a weird book review because, as you know, I am reading this book. So when I get to my last clip, there's gonna be like, I just finished blah blah blah, and I'll have like the actual official date at the top. But I have to make clips because this is so effing big. Like, look at this chunky monster. I was just uploading a video of Dark Promise. No. Sorry. Blood Promise. Right? Blood Promise? I believe it's Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead. Regardless. It was a Vampire Academy book. I was looking at it and it looked nearly just as big as this book. And it's a hardcover book. And I say it's just as big as this book, and that's including like the cardboard hardcover of it. It's nearly as big as this because Blood Promise is a pretty big book, and it took me a long time to finally get the book review of that. And I think, like, I had just said I just started reading this book, and my book review doesn't happen until like a month later because I think I had to renew it. But anyway, so if you have read It by Stephen King, this is going to be a bit of an intro also. You would know that the chapters are organized like this. So it's in parts, like that. So I just finished part 1. I finished the first 3 chapters, and I have yet to read Deary First Interlude, this thing here. So I wanted to just kind of save that and read, basically do a mini reviews of kind of each part. So yeah, I don't know how long that interlude is. How long? It's about 20 pages. So yeah, I think I might just add on another like small mini review of that. But I want to do, you know, first 3 chapters. So the first 3 chapters that I keep repeating. Yes. Alright, so chapter 1 is all about Georgie, Pennywise, the boat, and Bill when he was like 11, like between 11 and 13, that like child teenager age, or pre-teenage. And I have to say, Stephen King, you are yes, I will agree that you are a great writer, and your input on the Americanized version of Kingdom Hospital was amazing, fantastic, and I love the cameo you make at the end of the series. But you tend to be very winded in your writing. Like, you have a weird way of writing, and it's like a bit frustrating. Like, you go you go all over the place, but in kind of a sometimes boring way, I'm sorry to say. I read Misery. It was like a 1/4 of this size, but it had the same kind of windedness. It was basically a carbon copy of the movie with Kathy Bates. Which was really great, so that's why I'm reading this, because also the books have certain scenes that are not put in movies. So, okay. Chapter 1, as I said, was about Georgie, Pennywise, and the boat, and little pre-it Billy. And it was pretty much the way it was in the movies, where, you know, Billy makes this boat for Georgie. Georgie is out in the rain in his slicker and galoshes, and he's watching his boat, and somehow he gets hurt. And in the book, so in the Tim Curry movie, I think he knocks himself out on like the no crossing sawhorse barricade, And I think that happens in the new movie as well, but I'm not 100% sure. But regardless, Georgie kind of falls and is stunned a little bit, and then watches his boat kind of like zing off very fast. Zing off very fast in a direction that is not good, and he runs and runs and runs, but then it falls down a drain. And then, you know, meets Pennywise, they have that weird conversation, and then Pennywise basically the arm. But I think I like the, you know, like the death scene in the movie than I do in the book, because in the movies, Pennywise, regardless of the movie and the book, he grabs Georgie's arm, and, you know, in the movie he goes and bites it and basically bites the arm off. And the new one, oh my live-loving lord, Georgie kind of staggers away, and then this arm comes out and drags Georgie back into the sewer drain. Oh my god, that doesn't happen in the Tim Curry one, but the new one, oh my god, that was even scarier. In here, either it's just that part, the fact that he goes, actually no, that's not true. Georgie doesn't go down the drain. He gets kind of found by a person in the middle of the road, so I find that's a little anticlimactic. Well, other than the fact that, you know, he gets his arm ripped off or like chewed off sort of thing. Regardless, that, like, literally as I was reading it, my stomach was becoming sick. Oh my god. But the aftermath is a little lackluster. I'm sorry. I like the movie version better. Because that was just fucking scary. Okay? I do scare easily, but, you know, comparing it to the Tim Curry movie and now comparing it to the book, I like the new version better. Fucking scary. And that's pretty much all chapter 1 is like that basic scene. And it kind of goes back and forth, like it has a chunk of like Georgie outside, and then it goes back in time to when Georgie is in the house talking to Billy and has to go get the paraffin, and he's scared of the basement and all that stuff. I don't really want to keep talking about that. It's really winded. And that whole thing, and then it continues on with the whole outside scene. And yeah, other than I definitely think the second half of the Pennywise scene was a bit lackluster. Other than that, it was a pretty good chapter. It basically had everything, all of it. And then we get to chapter 2. It is, how long? So it's like 27 years, 27, 28, roughly that. Cause, you know, this, you know, all the first part, the children part happened in 1957/1958, and then chapters 2 happens about 27, 28 years, which is 1984. And I have no idea how this chapter relates to anything to our 7 kids and / adults, other than the fact that Pennywise just basically kills and it kills the person. Like, they were already they were brutalized. They were punched, they were kicked, they were scratched, apparently bit, and they were tearing their clothes off, and just this person was being tossed around and then thrown off the side of a bridge and fell down the side of a slight hill and then fell into the water. And by the time his lover, this is a gay couple, his lover came to the water, he was already across the water in Pennywise's arms, and his lover watched Pennywise bite his armpit out. And yeah, other than the fact that, you know, Pennywise is taking on another victim, I don't see the reason for it. And then the fact that, for those of you who have watched the movie, by the time this goes up, a lot of you should have watched the movie. And I'm going off the movie because I don't know how they do it in the book. I'm pretty sure it's kind of the same as the book, but from the movie, when they're in the sewers and first confronting it in its lair, you know, it's got this huge pile of like bodies, and there are bodies floating in the air, and technically they're actual bodies that he's taken. And as far as the premise goes in the movie, that it basically takes the body and eats it and eats their soul and whatnot, but it seems in the book he basically kind of just eats their soul, sort of basically takes a chunk out of them. Well, I think takes a chunk out of them and basically takes their soul. Because literally, like, you know, like the dead eyes and like the people who are its victims are staring, and it's like the soul just goes out through the eyeballs and into it type of thing. That's what I get in the book, is that he just takes their soul and a piece of them and then disappears. But in the movie, he takes everything, which I think is better, because then it's like, you know, it's like they've disappeared. Whereas in the book, it seems like they find the body, not always necessarily right away, but like either like immediately, like with Georgie, or like with the gay guy that was taken by Pennywise. I guess he was found like maybe the next day or something. And so I'm not fully understanding the premise of what it does, and whether or not like he does take the body, or he just takes a piece of the body, because I'm pretty sure that's what he did with Georgie in the book. So I don't know if you're gonna leave in the comments below. You can if you want, but I'm pretty sure I will have read it. I will read, like, I will get more information about it and what he does. Like, if he takes the entire body and then, you know, like maybe a few hours later is able to take the soul and then just lets the body go because he doesn't need the body anymore. But I don't know. I don't know. And then so chapter 2 is just a confusing fuck, other than Pennywise is a fucking psycho and he's sick, and this alien is just like, I do not want this thing in our world. I am so glad that it is in a make-believe Earth of Stephen King's making. It is not real. Okay, granted, we do have psychopaths like that, but not like that can become your own worst nightmare and stuff like that. So chapter 1 makes sense. Chapter 2 doesn't make sense other than the it factor. So we get to chapter 3, and it's called 6 Phone Calls in 1980. Damn it. 1985. No? Yes, 1985. Also, that second chapter was all within the year of 1984, so a year before the 6 Phone Calls. I had a lot to say about chapter 2 because it didn't make a whole lot of sense, okay? Yeah. So chapter 3, as it states, is 6 phone calls, because as we know from the movies, Mike Hanlon stays, well, from the first original movie. You have to watch the original movie, okay? That's all I gotta say to you. You have to watch the Tim Curry movie and then watch the newer version, because it's Tim Curry and it's great. And it's scary, but not as scary as the newer version. So Mike Hanlon is apparently still living in Derry, and he calls the other 6 people. And it basically follows the same format, with a few edits in the movies that, you know, these are the adult kids and they don't remember. And I like the fact that this chapter basically, it was all of them. It was the exact same as what I watched in the Tim Curry movie, with, you know, a few edits. Like with the Ben Hanscom part, where in the movie and the book, he is an architect, but in the movie, he's kind of a swinger. He, like, sleeps around with a lot of women, it seems. Because literally, when you meet him, he is in a limousine, kind of drunk off his ass after getting an award, and he's got a girl with him that, you know, you kind of assume he's gonna sleep with, and then he gets the call from Mike, and, you know, all of these memories that the kids slash, like, the teens, because they were teenagers once they started forgetting these memories, forgot when the memories start coming back from this Mike Hanlon phone call. Yeah, that, the Ben one is pretty much the only one that was different, like, kind of really different, whereas the Stan one, even though it was more in the mind frame, this is all in third person, but it sort of like followed the mind frame of his wife, and so Stan, you know, committed suicide, and yeah, and that's the same thing from the movie, and his wife found him, and all that was all the same. Next was Richie, who basically is the wise ass, crack ass. He makes a lot of jokes and whatnot. In his adult life, he kind of does, no, he's a comedian of sorts. I don't know exactly what he is. He's called the man with 1,000 voices, which is weird, but he's kind of a comedian. He makes, like, you know, makes funny, but they're more like adult funniness, because they're not all like in general kind ofness that, you know, kids can enjoy, like everyone can enjoy. And it kind of followed the same premise. Like his agent, yeah, I think his agent was a complete ass in the book, as he kind of is in the movie. Like, wow, what an ass. And he had the same scene of, like, some memories start coming back and he gets sick and he actually pukes in the toilet, and just, and that was the same, which I really appreciated. The Eddie one actually, yeah, the Eddie one is, it seemed like it was the most changed, and I wasn't that upset. It still had the basic premises of, he basically was taking all his medication that he has, basically he's kind of leaving the house in a rush and just wants to leave. But this one, I don't know in the movie, like, as I'm saying, this chapter I've read is all in line with the Tim Curry movie, because we don't have chapter 2 of the new movie, but that should actually be filming right now. Again, I don't know how they're titling it. So in the book, right, okay, hold on, I was talking about the movie. I can't tell if that's his wife or if that's his mother, because it looks like the same actress that they did in a flashback of his mother when he was a kid. So I don't know, it's a bit confusing. And in the book, he did marry, but he married a woman that was basically a carbon copy of his mother. So I think that's why it's confusing in the Tim Curry movie, whether or not that's a wife he married or if that's his mother. And the other thing is, he owns like town cars slash limousines. Like, he has a business that chauffeurs around, like, celebrities and kind of famous people, and that's the same thing in the book. But he doesn't leave in his own car, or, like, you know, one of his drivers doesn't drive him away. He gets a taxi. And in this one, he's a lot nicer in the book than he was in the Tim Curry movie. I'm doing a lot of comparisons because all I have is the Tim Curry movie. Yeah. We didn't have the flashbacks with any of these people, unlike the Tim Curry movie, but I think that was the purpose, because the Tim Curry movie was like, it's trying to encompass everything, whereas the book, you don't need to have the childhood stuff, because in another part of the book, like, I think part 2, right? Yeah, part 2 and part 4 are about their childhood, that year, that summer of 1958. Yeah, 1958, yeah. Or, I don't know, the summer in the 50s, where that is the flashbacks in the Tim Curry movie. So, yeah, Stan is the one, is like, Stan and Ben are like the biggest contrasts from the Tim Curry movie to the book, because and then we get to the Ben one, where he's not technically going home. He goes to a bar after he gets the phone call, and he does nothing with a woman, because literally he goes there for this weird drink, and what he does is like really, really weird, which I think would kill anyone. And then after he's done and has like conversation with the bartender, and that's where we kind of get this weird, the adult side of the story. And then he leaves, and literally he's going to go catch a plane. And it was very, very subdued, unlike the movie one, where he kind of literally starts drinking. And then he goes into like a blubbering state, because he's all this dairy and all these memories are coming back, and they were scary and they were not pleasant. Well, a majority of them were not pleasant. Some of them were pleasant because he made friends. And he was fat, and he was made fun of, and all of that stuff that comes with when you are fat. And a 12-year-old, that age. Yeah. Next we get to Beverly, and that literally is like carbon copy that they did in the movie that is from the book, except for a slight change with the ending, where the fight she has with, in the book it's her husband, but I can't tell in the movie, but it's this guy named Tom. His name is Tom, and in an abusive relationship. And she gets the realization, like, I just got out of an abusive relationship with my father, and then I find a man that I thought I was in love with in an abusive relationship. So it's like, yeah. And then in the movie, it seems like she has money. She has her purse, so she's got all her cards and extra cash and all that type of stuff, because she ends up in a taxi. Whereas in the book, she, in this haste, because like she stood up her freedom and basically whooped Tom's ass, and like he was on the floor, he was basically in pain, and so she was kind of rushing to get dressed, and then he started yelling, and you know, he's only gonna be on the floor for so long that she literally forgot her purse, which would have had all of her keys, her card, extra cash, maybe even a cell phone at the time, because it's like the mid-80s. They might have had those gigantic phones. And she also forgot her shoes. So, yeah. The whole Beverly thing was a carbon copy, but it started out in Tom's point of view, and then we read him going downstairs to go find a beer, and he's already kind of in a mood because like he was drinking the night before. It's like midnight, so like a few hours earlier he was drinking, and he wakes up with like, you know, a hangover type thing, and then it just kind of boils over with like he's an abusive lover, and that's not great. And so he gets upstairs, and that's when the abusiveness starts coming out of him. Which is then when we actually switch over to Beverly's point of view in third person, and it's a really short piece. We get more of Tom and less of Beverly, which is weird. But that ends that, and then we come to Billy, our little stutterer, and other than a few little minor changes, it basically was a carbon copy. The movie was a carbon copy of the book. It had him getting a phone call, and them him and his wife kind of talking it out. Her name is still Audra. Her real name is Audrey, so I think it's Audra. There we go. Audra, and then Audrey. No, but her name is Audra. Audra. That's her. Okay, so yes, Audra. And yeah, there is a little extra in the movie where he was writing a book, and she had made dinner and he was late and it had gotten cold and all that stuff. So yeah, I've been pleasantly good with the first 3 chapters, other than chapter 2, which is like, again, what the fuck is that? So yeah, I'm gonna now read the interlude now, and then I'll do that review part. Yeah, I all the scariness was in chapters 1 and 2. There was no real scariness other than the Beverly part. Like, that was nuts because abusive lover, that's never good. I'm even with the scariness, it's actually good. And the scariness part was like perfect, even though I've said Stephen King, he's got a winded way of writing, but oh my god, I was scared. And as I said, I got sick from the chapter 1. Yeah. Okay, so it's obviously the next day, and I wanted to make 2 notes and continuing my review of this book. One, the chapter 3 that involves the 6 phone calls. I have 5 here because I only have 5 fingers on my hand, but I like that in the book it describes a majority of what happened to the kids once they left Derry. Like, after leaving Derry, they began to forget, but they also had other lives that is separate from Derry, which is like the main plot of the story. But I like in their individual parts because like it's 6 different parts in this chapter, like they're numbered, which is weird. I don't know why Stephen King does that kind of writing in his book, but other than that, I just like that he describes it more. I like what happened after they left Derry. And the other note is that the Tim Curry movie, first off, Beverly is a redhead. The way he describes it is that she has whore hair. Now, I don't know exactly what whore hair is, but she has like this fiery red hair, which is the child actress they used in the newer version. But in the Tim Curry movie, the child and the adult have like this sandy blonde brown hair, or like a sandy blonde hair. It's not completely blonde, but it's not completely brown. But other than that hair color that's not like in the book, both the actresses, the child and the adult that played Beverly, they were great. I loved them personally, like great actresses. Now to the actual book review. So I finished the interlude last night and I liked it. It's written in a weird first person / third person point of view, and excuse me, where is it? As it says in this paragraph here that is slightly different from the start of the actual interlude here. We don't know who that one is, but it says in there, like literally in it, this is an unpublished set of notes and accompanying fragments of manuscript which read almost like diary entries. And I literally feel that there are diary entries, but it's just Mike writing down his thoughts and the facts of what happened. Not exactly what happened in their past, like as children, but the notes that happened as an adult when it starts reemerging. And he has this whole like inner dialogue of himself. And I really like that. That part was a whole lot better to understand than the other parts, like the first 3 chapters. So I really like the interlude. It's written great, it flows well, and it gives, well, this one, because I don't know about the other interludes, there's 5 interludes, but there's 4 more left, so I don't know exactly how those are going to be written, because the next part, and into chapter 4, part 2, is June of 1958. So we're going to get to the first incident of the it thing, so part 2. Well, yeah, so so far I really like the interlude. I haven't read another interlude to say like I like all the interludes, but with it being written in a sort of first person, I don't know what this hybrid is. I can't say it's a second person view, but it's a weird hybrid of first and third person in like a weird diary entry kind of thing. So yeah, that's my next part of my review. Hi everyone! Here's my next review part of It by Stephen King. Okay, so I just finished part 2, which is June of 1958, and I finished all 6 chapters, and they actually, why are you, am I off center? There we go. There we go. So yeah, as I said, there's 6 chapters, so each kid has their own chapter where they explain their first encounter with it. And they were pretty much some of them were pretty much spot on with what happened in both movies, whereas other ones were the same in the Tim Curry one, or they were the same from the new version. And then there's Stanley's one, where his is, you know, he doesn't get his own chapter, but he's kind of lumped in with Beverly's chapter, where he tells of his own story, because that's typically the only way you're going to get Stanley's part, is within one of the 6 chapters, because he's dead. Yes. Now, Stanley's was, okay, let me go kind of by chapters, sort of. Okay, I don't want that, because that's, okay, what number does that start? 156, okay. 165, I mean. So, the first chapter is Ben Hanscom takes a fall. So, this is Ben's chapter, and it's, you know, all about him. Now, I don't remember what Ben's scary part was. I don't know why. I don't remember what it is. But in the book, he has an encounter outside, because sometimes, you know, they happen inside the house, inside houses or buildings. So yes, his is outside, and he sees a mummy. And it's not like you can, apparently it's not one that, oh, that's totally fake. They're trying to make it old, but it's, you can totally tell it's fake. Apparently this one is, you know, a for real mummy that came out of a real coffin and is so bone dry and all that such. And it's walking across a frozen lake with a handful of balloons, and the balloons are blowing against the wind. So like if the wind was coming like towards you guys, so they were blowing from my back to there, they would, I think they would be holding steady. I think that's what it is. Like they're just, you know, they're staying straight and they're walking forward with the mummy. And that's his. And I think he was also like gonna climb up, you know, where he was on the bridge. I don't know if that's true with either movie, but that's that. But in this chapter, it describes of how Ben gets his H scar on his belly, and that was true with, in parts it was true for both movies, but in the Tim Curry one he doesn't get the scar, but in the new movie that is part of it. But the way he meets Bill and Eddie, and maybe some of the other gang that's in the new movie, the boys don't even be like, in the new movie they're like, oh my god, you're bleeding, we gotta get some stuff, we gotta sew you up, Eddie, like, because Eddie is like the medical freak, not really himself, but because his mom has pushed all this stuff on him. So in the movie that's what they do. But in the Tim Curry one and in the book, they don't really care that he's like there's like all this dry blood on him, and they just kind of start working on a dam. Yeah. Which, yeah, I'm perfectly fine with that. It's good. You know, I liked it. I was surprised and shocked with the whole mummy thing, because it was good. I liked it. And then the next one is, okay, I can't remember what that one is. I gotta go back. I need to go to that chapter, which is 221. I don't know who that is. Who is talking? Okay, it's Bill, which would make sense. So, I think this chapter and like the boys in this book, some of the boys, like with Bill, he is more properly represented in the Tim Curry movie, whereas he's not. I don't know. He's his own entity in the new movie, but his encounter is pretty much the same in both of them, with minor edits. I don't remember. Actually, no, this was in the movie, the Tim Curry movie. So the thing is, like, he's in Georgie's room, he's checking out all his stuff because he kind of hasn't been in there in a while and he wants to reminisce, or else he's feeling guilty. Either way, he's in his room checking out stuff, and then he pulls out this photo album that apparently Georgie really wanted to make with all these old photos. And so he gets to this grade picture. It's a nice big picture of him, of Georgie. You know, like picture day. It's one of those pictures. And all of a sudden his head turns and winks at Bill. And, you know, Bill tosses it, and then all of a sudden it comes alive and starts flipping pages. And then it gets back to Georgie's picture day picture. And the picture's bleeding. Now that's true for both of them. But in the Tim Curry one, his parents come in and are like, "What are you doing here? Get out of here." And they're like, and he's like, "Don't you see the blood? The picture's bleeding." And his father is like handling it. He's getting all this blood over him, like his hands mainly. And he shuts it and then puts it away. And they're like, "Do not ever come back in here again." Like, they are so mean. And as far as I know, it happens in the new version, but I don't think the whole parent thing happens. In the book, it doesn't happen. So, you know, I'm recently happy with Bill's chapter because it was like pretty much a lot and common copies from the movies, which, you know, is great. I like it. But again, Stephen King just, you know, kind of takes a long time to get to the point, but, you know, and I don't know how he beats the devil. I can't remember that far back why it's called. Oh well. The next chapter is on 250, 251. Alright, the parts don't help. Okay, it's the Eddie chapter. Now, the Eddie chapter, right? Wait, it's not the Eddie. No, it can't be the Eddie chapter. Okay. So, this chapter is a weird one. It is Mike Hanlon's chapter, or token black boy, because apparently at that time there's like always a token black guy, where there's a group of white boys, there's one black boy, and then if it's really great, there is the token girl. There's one girl in the group, which is this entire book. So in this one, this was interesting, where it showed like a lot of more of Mike. We don't get to see a lot of Mike, like in the Tim Curry movie, but in the second movie we see a little bit more, but not by much. And there's others, I haven't gotten to those parts where in the second movie, but there is stuff in the book that wasn't even shown, and I liked seeing, you know, I actually enjoy, you know, the background of stuff. Again, a lot of these were just relatively enjoyable chapters. There's nothing really new that I didn't already see or watch. I'm literally just comparing the book to the movies. But with this chapter, they have here. They have sort of newspaper clippings of sorts in here. And it was interesting, and they're talking about this one boy, Eddie Cochran. I want to pronounce his name Cochran, but the way they spell his last name doesn't make sense for it to be Cochran, but I am pronouncing it like that. And they have the fact that his stepfather beat him and his little brother. His little brother died of an accident, and Eddie kind of disappeared. Eddie was the older brother. So we get a bunch of that, and we follow the trial, and then eventually the stepfather kills himself out of like guilt, and during the trial he confesses that yes, he did kill the younger brother and did abuse them, but you know, he didn't kill Eddie. Like, I have no idea what any of this has to do with the story, but this is interesting. I like this stuff. And then we get to what part is that technically called? Oh, it's just part 3. And then I get, like, after it shows all of those newspaper clippings, it gets to like the story, but it's Eddie's story, and it's showing us the night of like when he disappeared. Like, he was at school apparently, and then, you know, nobody saw him after school, and he just disappeared for the rest of his life. His body never showed up, because from what I've read in these last 6 chapters, it does one of 2 things with the body, depending on the situation. Either it will take the body, you know, eat some parts of it, you know, take the soul, and then, you know, the body will magically show up. Or, you know, it'll take the body and just keep it forever, and it will never show up. Or sort of, this is with like part 1. In Georgie's case, you know, like, Georgie screamed, it really only got one part of his body, and somebody found him, like, literally found him right away. So with Eddie, this all happened on the night he didn't come home from school. He didn't want to deal with his stepfather, he didn't want to get abused, and apparently it's true that he didn't spend some nights at home. But this night, he never returned, because it got him. And it was the creepiest. It was nearly as creepy as the Georgie scene. Oh my god. But he didn't see Pennywise. He saw the creature from the Black Lagoon, which I don't know what that creature really is called other than the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's like some aquatic underwater creature that, you know, whatever. And before he can get to safety, or what he presumes is safety, he trips, and, well, the creature gets him. And literally the creature grabs him by the neck and, you know, suffocates him. You know, he's already dead. But the creature goes one step further and basically completely crushes his neck and pops the head off his body. And then drags the body down to the lake. And it disappears forever. Oh my god, that was... I did not like it, but it was great. And then literally the next part starts the entire Mike story, and he never comes across the kids. I don't know why it takes him so long to get with the group, but whatever, not my story. So he doesn't really come into the town a whole lot, unlike the new movie Perceived Us with. I think it was more like the Tim Curry one, but in kind of both of them, both his parents are dead, at least I think. I don't know about his parents in the Tim Curry movie, but in the new version, his parents died in a fire, and so now he's just terrified of fire and, you know, kind of roasting dead bodies. And he's living on the farm with his grandfather and does all the farming stuff, but he's the one who has to go into town and, you know, go to they have a butcher counter, like a butcher shop, and so he ferries meat from the farm to the butcher shop, and I think to other butcher shops. In the new movie, we see a scene where he sees, like, his It version, where he gets to the family's butcher shop, and in the movie, he gets to their butcher shop, and, you know, he's setting his bike down and, like, starting to pick up some of the meat packs that they've wrapped at the farm. And suddenly the side door, or like the back door or the side door, somewhere where you go into the back room of shops, and all of these, like, charred, roasted hands are coming along the side of the door, and he's terrified. And then they kind of, you know, they disappear back into the thing, and it shuts. And then all of a sudden it bursts open. And at the far end, he can see the meat locker, or like the freezer, whichever you call it. Like it's really, it's like all frosted and such, and has like the long plastic sheets that you can pass through. And he kind of sees Pennywise, kind of. Like all he can really see is like these two bright orange pom-poms. And it takes like, I think 2 steps forward, and then all of a sudden his grandfather comes by and he's like, "Hey, you okay, boy?" And like that was terrifying. But in this, I don't know, it was terrifying and yet not terrifying at the same time. It was obviously terrifying because he got stuck like and backed into a corner with this big crazy bird chasing after him. And apparently he's had some dreams of like something about like the bird, or the bird, something about a bird kept thinking in his mind. And when he sees the bird at this, you know, destroyed place, he looks down into this big crater of something. I don't remember the location that he's at, but it's in Derry's past, and I think it was like the huge factory explosion. I believe it was. I don't know if I'll say anything, but if you know what it is, you can say in the comments below. But he looks into this giant crater, and he sees the bird, and it's like this dead, sort of decaying bird. Sort of, like it's got maggots and like yucky stuff, and yeah, like its nest is disgusting. It's not a normal nest, and so it chases after him. It gets him cornered and tries to eat him, but he throws a stone. Like he throws 2 stones, and then this third one hits it in the eye and it backs away and out. And yeah, like he kind of gets backed into a corner, but then he's like got rocks, and then he runs out with rocks. And like part of me was like kind of terrified, but also it just, I don't know, it didn't feel as terrifying. Yeah. So like the whole Mike Hanlon part was pretty great, but the whole It scenario wasn't the best as some of the other ones. So yeah. I had to break this one too because my sister's going to bed and I needed to do cream stuff. Like she had a really bad sunburn, so I got to put some cream on her. And so the next one is, what page do we start? This is Eddie's. It should be Eddie's part. Damn it. I gotta go to 290. Yes, it is Eddie's part. And it follows a bit more of the majority of this part of the story. The story follows more to the Tim Curry part, but when he actually encounters it, it's a little more in tune with the new one. I don't even think we see his scary part in the Tim Curry one. I don't even remember if it does, so. And so, like, he may have talked about this leper, but they never showed it. And they showed, like, pretty much all of their flashbacks where, you know, the whole, I believe, like, the whole, like, the photo album, the bloody bathroom scene with Beverly. Yeah, that's actually, those are the only 2 I remember. Whereas I remember all the stuff from the new movie. So with the Eddie part, you know, with the first 3, like Ben, Bill, and Eddie, they kind of start in the same spots. So like when Ben comes down or falls down the hill and is like they're at the riverside, and like Bill and Eddie are over here, and then Ben is over here having just entered the area, and that sort of thing happens. It all, like, Ben's kind of ends there, and then Eddie's and Bill's kind of starts in that area. It was good continuity. It's just weird how all these stories kind of flowed with each other in a weird way, but it was good at the same time because it reminded you and kept your mind flowing with the story. Yeah. Yeah. So in the movie, I don't know for what goddamn reason, but he decides to pass through a property a really old abandoned house. And they all think it's creepy, they think it's haunted, they don't understand the connection of why it's so creepy and haunted, and like it's all boarded up and whatnot. So he's passing through, and like he's kind of at the halfway point, and this homeless bum person comes out of the woodwork and kind of chasing after him, and he's terrified, and his asthma's working up and all that. And then he gets to the far end, and he's literally going to go under through shrubbery, through a fence to get to, like, I guess his house, his side of where his house is. And that's when the leper hobo guy turns into Pennywise, because like he says something and causes Eddie to turn around, and that's where Pennywise is, and he's holding balloons in front of his face, and then he lifts it up and is like, hi, the creepy grin. Oh Lord. And I don't remember what he does to cause Eddie to scream and then leave, but that's the movie version. Whereas in the book, it's sort of like the same dynamic where like this hobo bum kind of appears, chases Eddie, and, you know, leaves, you know, and like disappears. But in the book, it's, I don't know, it was more terrifying, yet the same sort of terror as in the book, in the new movie. So Eddie decides to check this place out. I don't remember why, and I don't think he knows why. It's just a feeling of checking it out, because he just has a fear of like hobos and bums and lepers and like all that stuff, because like even though he is not, like, all this medical stuff is being pushed on him, it's kind of embedded in him now that he's terrified of, you know, getting really sick and catching stuff and, you know, all that good yucky stuff. And so he goes under the porch, and then all of a sudden he calls it a leper, because I guess that's really what it looks like. Disgusting looking, but covered up at the same time. Bursts through a basement window, and it's coming out and it's talking to him, and like Eddie is like super terrified. At one point I think it actually touches him, and he's like so freaked out, and like he's ran so fast he bursts through the opposite side from where he comes in under the porch, and through bushes, so he gets all scraped up, and he kind of trips, and he's like, oh, turns around and is like, oh my god, okay, it's okay. But then the leper pushes through the rose bushes, and so we've got like good roses here on either side, but right through the middle, it's all like, just from the leper touching it, it's all dead and decayed and like dead. It's all yucky and brown and can't live anymore, and it's just like scrambling, like sort of like crab like over the lawn to get after him. And then Eddie crosses through like the opening in the chain link fence that has the walkway up to the house, crosses the street, gets to his bike, turns around, and it's kind of disappeared, and then leaves. As I said, it was, both scenes were terrifying itself, but I think this one just had this little more terrifyingness that, you know, makes it good. And like, I was terrified for Eddie to get out of that situation. Just like, I don't want to be touched by those kind of people, because like, yeah, I'm not a super clean germaphobe. Like my boyfriend's a germaphobe. He's not. Like, you know, the state of my room, it doesn't gross him out as much as like if I had like garbage and food just sitting around. I keep it decently clean. I have like maybe clothes all over the floor, like maybe some books, some bags, but not like food all over the place, or like tissues and that kind of gross germy stuff. So yeah, but you know, I wouldn't want that stuff on me at all. Yeah. So the next chapter is Richie's chapter. And in the Tim Curry movie, if you hadn't noticed this, Seth Green plays Richie in the Tim Curry version. I did not realize this when I first watched it, and at first I wasn't realizing it right at the beginning, but I think like a third, like getting to like that between the first and the second third of the movie, I was like, oh my god, that's Seth Green. All that shock of red hair and the way his face is. Oh god. I don't really remember how he starts into the book, but it involves him, Ben, and Beverly, and sort of like his situation around the story. He and, if you remember, they go to a movie. I don't remember if it's in the new one, but it is in the Tim Curry version, where actually the entire group goes sees a movie, but in the book it's only Ben, Richie, and Beverly that go see a movie. And you know, they're seeing horror pictures. Like the first one is a Frankenstein one, and the second one is a actually I think they were called like I Was a Teenage Frankenstein and I Was a Teenage Werewolf. Something about teenager and like Frankenstein and werewolf in the names. Like they were two separate movies, but they were both teenagers. One was Frankenstein, one was werewolf. So anyway, they watch it, and Ben is terrified, is kind of terrified throughout the whole thing because, one, he's like in love with Beverly, and two, Henry Bauer and his gang of friends, a gang of bullies, that's what he is, are at the movie too. And this theater is one of those rare theaters where they have a balcony section, so like it's a 2-floor theater. It's very rare to see those in like a movie theater. You see that a lot in like the stage theaters where you see musicals or plays and stuff like that. So at the end, Ben is like, oh my god, the guys left but they saw us up here. And I was like, oh okay, we'll go out the back way. But that doesn't work, and they have to go through a fight. So I think it was like a day later. Yeah, because after the fight they go down to this section in town, but that is like their hangout spot, and then so like they're hanging out there, and all of a sudden Bill comes in with this weird friend that has a lisp. That's what it is. Whereas Ben is stuttering Ben. Stuttering Bill, not Ben. Ben is the fat kid. And so that's where, you know, why am I'm talking like this? I don't know why. So the day after that, Richie and Bill are talking, and they talked about all the, like, the strange occurrences they had. And Richie goes over to Bill's house and sees, like, you know, the whole bloody thing. And like this chapter has two of them, two really scary spots. So they're upstairs, they're checking out the book, and they're like, Georgie's picture day picture is gone, but kind of in its place is this really old-fashioned picture of like back in the day, where I think it was like the 1930s sort of dress, and then all of a sudden it comes to life and it, you know, comes into color. And all of a sudden they see two little boys that look like themselves, and they see a balloon, and those two little boys in the picture go over to it, and for some reason Bill decides to stick his hand in there and goes to like about this, no, goes up to about here, and because he says he didn't get his pinky in there, except for his nail got cut off, but the knuckles here were cut really deeply. I don't know how. I don't really need to know how. But this is a weird another incident with it. And then once he pulls his hand out, it goes back to its original state and being frozen in time. And that was a bit freaky because, like, you know, you're gonna... he's in pain, and he basically nearly got his fingers chopped off. And if he went any farther, his, you know, like, he would have been a cripple himself. Ah, stupid boys, but whatever. And then the next day after that, like that day, you know, he says, I'm going to the house. I'm going to go see this leper. I'm going to check it out, see if it's true. I'm just going to check it out. And they do. And they find out Eddie was telling the truth at this creepy old house. And so they go in. And this is when Richie has his own fear. Now, I don't understand how this is his own fear, because it doesn't, I don't think it really makes sense, but whatever. Again, it doesn't happen in the Tim Curry movie, but this theme happens in the new version. In the new version, he's by himself. No, actually, I don't know. But he's by himself. No, it does happen in the Tim Curry version. He's by himself. He kind of made a mess on the floor. A teacher told him to go get like a mop, and he's down there in the basement, and he's like, "Hey, janitor person's name." And he kind of hears like some scuffling, and then, you know, a whole werewolf situation happens. And then he comes upstairs, and he's like, "There's a fucking werewolf in the basement!" And everyone laughs at him except for his friends, who are all very glum and very, you know, "I don't like the situation. I saw something really scary." So in the book, it's still a werewolf that appears, but it's in the basement of this old creepy house, and he's got Bill with him. So I don't understand how it's specific to just Richie, because Bill was there, he saw it, he was terrified himself, so I don't know how that makes sense, but that's that. And this one was pretty extended, and like this is probably the most, besides the Georgie Pennywise and then the Eddie creature, water creature scene, this Bill, Richie, and the werewolf scene was completely terrifying. I was scared for the boys. So they scramble out this other window that's atop this pile of coals, because, you know, houses used to run on coal fire before they changed over the gas. So Richie gets out and he hears Bill shoot like 2 shots at this thing, because he took his dad's gun to, you know, he wants to kill this thing. And, you know, he's like, "He's right behind me, Richie, help me out." And so Richie reaches in and grabs his arm, but he then sees that the werewolf has Bill's legs, and he eventually actually sees that it's the werewolf. But he also sees that it's a Derry high school jersey, and it's got some, you know, like orange piping around it. And this werewolf nearly has Bill, and like Bill is terrified, and then all of a sudden Richie starts talking in his voices, like he's a weird voice actor, and he just starts yelling at it in a weird voice, and it kind of the werewolf lets go of Bill, and they scramble out and are running, and this thing is back on their heels and just running. And even though they get out of the property, they run across the street, they get on the bike, this thing is still chasing after them, even into the streets. And Bill is riding his bike super fast, and the werewolf even like eventually grabs onto Richie, who is sitting behind him in, like, you know, like sometimes bikes have a basket on the back of their butt, and this werewolf tears like straight down, like rips his jacket in 2. And when he thinks like, "Oh, we've gotten pretty far," he turns around and he gets whacked so hard that he gets a mark here on the side of his head and passes out from a whack from the werewolf. And like Bill just pumps it so hard, and like, I don't know what happens, but he trips on something, and him and Richie just like tumble over, and there's like a tangle of bodies and bikes. And like he turns around and is like, "The werewolf's gone." But then he realizes that Richie is like kind of passed out. So he kind of shakes him, and then all of a sudden he like gives him a good whack, which causes him to wake up. No, like he was waking up, but he was like really dazed, and then he gives him a whack, and he's like, "What?" And like Richie turns around and it's like, it's not there. When Richie did turn around at some point before the werewolf grabbed him, he saw that the werewolf was wearing this Derry high school jacket. And there, you know, sometimes they have like, you know, your name monogrammed on it, or like it's on your last name's on the back and stuff like that. But it's on the chest right here that because it's chasing after him. And it said Richie Tyler. It said his name on it. But also it had pom-pom buttons on it. So usually that's how you can tell it's is by these orange pom-pom buttons on it. And like when both of them realized that, like, oh my god, that thing would have killed us, it actually chased after us, they started bawling. And it was like, thank god we made it out of there, we made it out alive. And I was so thankful that they made it out alive, because that thing terrified. I need a drink. I need to buy more of these, but I think I have to go over to Dollar Tree to find those. Shut the phone. Oh, and that was all of Richie. And so I just finished reading the last chapter, Cleaning Up, which is Beverly's story, which also has Stan's story in it too. Now, Beverly's story matches up decently well with both of them, but I think a little more with the Tim Curry one. The Tim Curry one did a little bit more book true to the story, but they both have a weird abusive relationship with their father. But the new one actually showed heavily that he, you know, wants to pretty much kind of wants to do sexual stuff to his daughter, whereas in the original you don't get to see that a whole lot. But in the book he does that in innuendo ways. Like, you see him, like, you read, he's tucked Beverly into bed, and then he's kind of hunched over with his hands deep in his pockets. You don't really know where they go, but you and I know, us audience know, that he is more than likely stroking his dick. Yeah. And he has this weird thing about him that, like, you know, females need more discipline than boys do, and they need to be smacked around more. And, like, that makes no sense. That just sounds stupid. I really don't like it. So, if the Tim Curry movie follows a bit more to the book than the new one does, but it still has this weird, abusive, sexual relationship between Beverly and her father. And in the book, Beverly has her mother. Her mother is not dead, like in the movies, so it's weird. And her mother even asks, like, does your father touch you? And it's like, you think? I got bruises on me, mama. But no, Beverly lies and says, no, I smacked myself into the wall. No, daddy doesn't touch me, blah, blah, blah. Now, Beverly's story isn't as terrifying as, I can't fully remember the Tim Curry one, but I do remember I think I do remember the new one. Yes, because it has some fucking amazing animation, like, CG. So, you know, all of them have, like, you know, a bloody bathroom, and, you know, cleaning up chapter. The movies go all out for the bloody gore, whereas in the book, it's really only the sink, like the floors kind of around the sink, the mirror, and like the wall around the mirror sink area. It's not the entirety of the bathroom that gets sprayed with blood. So, and like the voices are kind of the same, so that's pretty much where the similarities end. The new movie version is way creepier because, you know, all of this hair comes out of the sink and wraps around Beverly's head and literally is trying to pull her down the drain. And I don't know how she's able to pull back, but when she does, it's just like, or that's the second part, because it's two. So, you know, she gets the boys over and cleans up. And then, I can't remember if it's later that night or it's the next day, but in this book, it's later that day. She grabs a tape measure and puts it down. And in the book, it's kind of creepier, not that much creepier. But she's like, it's going down so far. And it's only, a sink drain should only go, like, about the size of your screen. Like, it should only go about this far, which is kind of like from your shoulder down to your fingertips. It should, or it's like only this long. I don't know, it should not be super long, but Beverly it keeps going and it keeps going down, and then all of a sudden something grabs it and it's like, it says someone is running with it, and it just goes. Oh my god. And it just keeps going. Yeah, that's great. And then all of a sudden, it says in the book that it's either something clicked it on the tape measure, like the bulk of it, or I think someone just lets go and it just runs up, and it's clean. Well, it's sink pipe clean for a while, and then all of a sudden all this blood is on it, and it's just gross. And I don't know if that's in the first one, but it's definitely in the second. I remember that, and it's just weird how that magic physics go, okay? Because that makes no sense. It should not happen like that. It can, because it can bend, but it can only like do like so many kinks, because it's the metal tape measure, and it can only do so many kinks in itself. So yeah. But then we also have, in this story, we don't have Stan's, like, you know, life story of what's happening behind the scenes with him, but he tells his first incident in Beverly's story. And it has nothing to do, well, it has half of the story that Stan tells is in the Tim Curry one, but it has nothing to do with the new one. And I actually like the new one a whole lot better. So in the book, Stan is asked by his father to go find this bird, but he doesn't find it. But he does see this new bird that he's never seen, and he's trying to mark it down, and this big boom sound happens. And so it scares all the birds, and he just decides to go home. But there's this thing that he passed by when he first entered the park. Sorry, I forgot to tell you, he went to a park, obviously, to go see this bird. And so this thing is there, and it's called standpipe. I don't know what the fuck a standpipe is. I know it's described, and it's got a bunch of water, but I don't know much more than that. And so kind of walks over there and finds out that, oh, this thing probably made the big boom. Not the door itself, but the padlock that was on it. And so eventually he hears this calliope music, which I think is how you pronounce, but it's like country fair, like it's a fairgrounds music that is playing. And so, like, you know, he kind of tentatively goes in, in his mind, he tentatively goes up 2 steps, and then all of a sudden he starts hearing wet galoshy sounds. And then all of a sudden he's kind of seeing shadows on the wall. And he's terrified. And then, so he's rushing down the stairs, and not realizing that he's actually gone up 12 steps. So and then the door closes. And he's kind of stuck in there, and, you know, the footsteps get closer, and it's kind of like 5 steps away. It's really dark in there. And, you know, people are talking. And it says, we're the kids, like, at least there's two voices. I think only one speaks, but there's at least 2 kind of bodies there. And they say that we're the kids that died in this water drain pipe thing. And, you know, like, you're gonna float with us too. They all anytime it comes around, it says, you're gonna float with us too. And so Stan is trying to open the door. He gets it like this much open, and then like he says like somebody is like literally pushing the door shut on me. And then he whips out his bird book and, you know, is starting to rip off all, like, not like badly, but he starts ripping off all these birds' names and just keeps saying them, and they're like stunned, and somehow it opens the door and it makes, you know, the entity kind of, you know, afraid. I don't know how. It's weird. But he stumbles out and says a few more bird names, and he sees like halfway up the body of, you know, like 2 boys. And he sees like the deteriorated jeans, like these really deteriorated shoes, and he can see like these purple feet, and like the same thing with the hands. And they're like, you know, if you're like died in the water, you kind of sit there for a long time, and especially if it's cold, you get hypothermia. No nonsense. And yeah, and apparently Stan is offended because he's Jewish and he kind of believes in the word of God, and he's like, you know, he says like, oh, God did a bunch of this, and then he did half of this stuff, and then he sits back and is like, you have to figure this out now. And he says like, you know, we believe in the word of God, and you know, God said like, my son walked on water and all that such. But he said like, if we saw them in real life, we'd scream our head off, and it's like, that's not real, that's not true, that can't happen. And so, like, he's offended that, you know, apparently, like, you know, the dead are alive. The dead are no longer dead, and that such. So he doesn't want anything to do with it, so that's why he kind of murders himself. And just, yeah. And when I say that it's, the Tim Curry one has it half right, is because it does. Like, he is out somewhere where he's, you know, finding bird stuff, and then he's attracted over to this house, and he kind of goes into the house, and I can't remember what he hears, but he hears some, like, he's looking at the stairs and he hears something upstairs, and then, like, you know, he gets really scared, and he turns around and the door shuts on himself, and all that's happening. I think something actually is coming down the stairs. I can't remember. But then he starts spouting off all the bird names and holding, like, in both the book and the movie, he's holding this bird book up and just saying all these bird word names, and eventually the door opens and he runs out, and he runs, in the movie he runs into Bill, and, you know, Bill spirits him away on his bike. So that's why I say it's half. In the new movie, he has a completely new terrifying thing that he's scared of, and I don't know how it ties in with the book here, because there is another, like, child section that's in July of 1958. Yes, July of 1958. So, and, you know, like, in the new movie he says, like, oh my, like, there's this thing, like, over his face, sort of like a face hugger, but it's got more of like a piranha mouth sort of thing, like, or no, a shark mouth. Like, it's got a bunch of rings of teeth, so like we got an outer ring, then an inner ring, and like so on and so forth, and it's just like on its face. I don't know exactly what it's doing, but he's on the floor and things on his face, and it's like this really creepy nun. Not the creepy nun from the Conjuring Warren series. Like, this is a weird painting thing, and that's his terrifying thing. But, and like, that's even so much more creepier than this stuff, like, especially in the book. But the book is a lot more creepier in the way it describes it than the movie. So all in all, I did generally enjoy this part. I haven't even read the interlude. This is my next thing, which is I'm more than likely going to read really fast. How long is this part? Why do you do that? I might. It depends on how much I get to read, because it's bedtime. Ah, and it's so late. So I generally liked it. It just kind of reiterated a lot of the stuff that happens in the flashbacks of the Tim Curry movie. And then it's sort of following the same storyline. Like, the new movie sort of follows the same storyline. But it pretty much does its kind of own thing, which is good and bad in one sense. Like, it's good and bad in a sense. It's good because it makes it fresh, but it's also bad because you're kind of not doing a lot of the stuff that's actually in the book. But I guess I kind of understand, because it just makes it even more terrifying. Now, the whole thing where the group of kids are in the creepy house, I really liked that scene, and where, like, they all kind of see it for the first time before they confront it down in the sewers, and, like, they supposedly kill it. I really liked that creepy scene. I don't know if we ever will see it in this book, because we have, you know, we have July of 1958, and as far as I know, that's just going to be them going down into the sewers and having, like, the first fight. Because, like, in the new movie, they have technically 2 fights, whereas in the Tim Curry movie, they only technically have 1 fight, as far as I can tell. So, yeah. So my next bits are the interlude, and then I will be reading the grown-up part. And there's only 3 chapters in the grown-up part, so yeah. I will have the interlude for you tomorrow, because I don't really want to read that much more tonight. Alright, so I finished the second interlude. That's what it's called. I to do this. Yes, it's called the second interlude. I'm gonna say it's not as exciting or as interesting as the first one. This one, talks about, you know, another incident happened, whether or not he should call them. It's like a few days, like I think it spans like 3 days. So it spans like about 3 days. Like there's 3 or 4 breaks, like there are different dates. No, like it doesn't span that. It spans 3 months, because it starts February 14th on Valentine's Day and then ends with the last one on March 1st. No, it's only 2 months. No, it's a span of 1 month. I am sorry. It's 1 month because it's February, then March. So, yes, so it's a span of 1 month. And as I said at the beginning, he talks about there's another incident where a child has gone missing. Actually, 2 children have gone missing. Let's use the correct grammar, Kristin. One's a teenager, and he's either missing or he's missing, because as far as I remember, he's referred to as one of the missing again. I don't know, but we're missing a teenager and a 2-year-old girl who is definitely missing. Like they hadn't found her body, and they think the father took her. And basically the reason I didn't really like this interlude is because it was basically him reminiscing about what his father said, and one of these incidences that his father had when it was during like the 30s, before I think it was before the words. It was before, third time saying this, that the Negroes were accepted into society, or African Americans, there we go, that's the correct term, but at the time they were referred to as Negroes and all that sort of jargon. And in the South there was the KKK, or the Ku Klux Klan, but apparently there was one up north, and it was referred to as the Legion of White Decency. And as far as Mike's father says, like they historians kind of like wiped out, like erased out of history the northern white decency, like this northern KKK clan, and because apparently they were ashamed of it, and they weren't as prevalent or as kind of in power or very much in society as the KKK. And so like they killed a bunch of people, even a bunch of white people, because his father at the time had made a kind of bar or some kind of place where black people were allowed to go, and they were, you know, like, because there were a lot of places in Derry that, you know, they served soda. That was the best thing to get until you got your alcohol, and even alcohol was much more scarce of getting than having Negroes allowed to have alcohol. And so the Legion of White Decency, basically, there is a few versions apparently that happened about this, but they surrounded the building, they had torches, and somehow, I don't remember the actual reason, but the building caught fire, and it started in the kitchen and moved up to the front. And yeah, a lot of people died, mainly Negroes and a bunch of white people. So yeah, lovely. A bunch of people were saved, including Mike's father, which is how Mike came to be. And Mike's father saw something before, like when Mike and 2 of his friends escaped through a window and then ran around to the front, where there was a car, and one of his friends kind of bulldozed into the side and like opened it so like people could get out, so that there were less people that died. But in that intermeeting of getting out of the window and then the hole breaking open a bigger hole, a human-sized hole in the building, Mike's father saw the people in white sheets running away, but his father saw a bird, and it was the bird that Mike saw when he was a child, because at the time, during this time, Mike's father is dying from cancer. He's in the hospital, and Mike is currently 15. So, like 4 years ago, he saw this bird, and a bunch of years earlier, Mike's father saw it, and it was the only time he ever really saw it, and it was a really big bird, and it had balloons tied to its, like, feet, and he's, like, at first he said, like, it was hovering, and then Mike was like, he was hovering? And he's like, no, it was floating. It's floating. That was the only real thing that was like, oh wow, that's kind of cool and creepy at the same time, that I saw the same bird. And yeah, other than that, it was kind of boring. I didn't really particularly like it. It just, I don't know. It also didn't feel so much like that, I don't know, weird second person diary entry type of writing. So yeah. That's all I got to say for the interlude. So yeah, it was okay. It told information, and the fact that Pennywise, I gotta call it Pennywise because I can't say it just doesn't roll off the tongue great. Pennywise was there and was the influence to that building being destroyed, because that bird would not be there if, and a lot, like, the way it happened, I doubt it would have happened that way if Pennywise wasn't a big influence there. So yeah, I am on part 3. Part 3, the grown-ups. And that is a long bunch of quotes right there. And it's only 3 chapters. So when does the next start, which is Derry, the third interlude, which starts at 6:40. What? When does it start? 6:47. It's decently small. But yeah, that's as much as I got to read. And then, like, look, oh, I lost it. And then, like, look, there's still a whole bunch left. So yeah, that's where I am now. It's a huge book. Oh my god. And I have till Tuesday. Because I can't put it on hold. I can't renew it because 2 people have put it on hold. So I'm hoping, you know, I can finish it, like, get more, like, because this is technically where I am, and then there's still this much left. I'm not even halfway through, so I really hope to get more done. Hello, everyone. So I just finished, again, I do this all the time, right there. Part 3, the grown-ups. And this was interesting. So the grown-ups is 3 chapters. So, and like the 1 and 2 are all about our 6 adults, or 6 kids, however you want to say, but our 6 main characters. Oh, I also want to say, I am very unhappy with these dots on my face, but as Manny, my boyfriend, said, these were caused by, because it was really hot and then it got really cold, and, you know, sometimes, you know, our bodies don't like that, so, but they're getting healed, and for some reason I can't wear, yeah, you guys may not be annoyed with them, but I am very annoyed with them. Especially this one. So yes, back to the part 3 review. The reunion was all about the lunch, and right now, this whole section, I can only compare it to the Tim Curry movie. So, as I said, chapter 10, the reunion is all about the lunch and all that happened there. And everything pretty much went well as expected. Everything was exactly the same, to the best of my knowledge. I enjoyed it. As I enjoyed the lunch in the movie. It was quite enjoyable. There was nothing different. Yeah, it was good. There's nothing all outwardly scary, other than, you know, the whole, like, when they get the fortune cookies and then yucky stuff coming out of them. But I think we were missing one. Yeah, Mike's didn't do anything. Like, we didn't see what happened with Mike's fortune cookie. I think we do in the movie, but in the book, I don't remember ever, you know, finding out what was in Mike's or what was going on with Mike's fortune cookie. Because Beverly's just spurted out blood. Richie's was a big googly eyeball. There was a weird cricket in Eddie's. Okay, so we got, yes, 3. Bill's was this weird fly mutated thing. We don't know what was in Mike's. Oh, I don't remember what was in Ben's. I don't know what the heck happened with Ben's. So we've got 2 that there was no information about, which was really annoying. And it was a little annoying because I think in the movie, kids, I'm gonna keep saying the kids, remembered more than the adults in here. In the book did at this lunch, and in the book they didn't remember much, and I didn't like that a whole lot. I also kind of didn't like the fact that, you know, Beverly was like, oh, I have a great husband and all that, blah blah blah, when she finally, you know, was like, alright, Tom is a dick. Tom is a real big fat dick that needs to go to prison, and he's a bad husband and all that and blah blah blah. But I think she was kind of like that in the movie as well. Not to, like, in regards to the movie, I couldn't really tell what one way was she was like, but in the book I was like kicking myself because I was saying, Beverly, why are you being like this? Why are you basically defending Tom again? And he's a big fat poopy head. Yes. Other than that, it was cool, but in this one, I did like the fact that Mike gave more information, like he was talking more about what had been happening in Derry, like recently, as to the build up to the call, like all the kids that were finding dead or, you know, finding out they went missing. Boost of sugar. It's just regular Coke. Yeah. It was a pleasant... I have nothing really to say because, like, the only really scary part was the fortune cookies, and, you know, I generally liked it. Now, the next part is chapter 11, called Walking Tours. Now, this is where each of them had their own parts. So, there were... yeah, there were technically 6 parts. The first part was where they kind of like began to branch off. Like, Bill said he was going to go for a walk in the drizzling rain. 2 of them took a taxi. 3 of them took a bus, and, you know, like, went their separate ways. So we have Ben is first, and I don't remember what he took. Doesn't matter what he took. But he got off, and he found himself at the library, and he had a sudden burst of memories. Now, I liked that, you know, when you're going on a walking tour and you're getting around stuff, and, like, if you have, like, they basically have amnesia, and, like, everything's gone, but then, you know, stuff comes back, so I liked the fact that Ben had, like, saw something and all his memories came flooding back. I liked that, but Ben was the only one, besides Mike, already having his memories. My sister's going for a shower, you can hear my dad, and stuff like that. So, the other 4 people didn't have, like, they saw something, but Stephen King did not write it. Of, like, and just everything came flooding back. And not those exact words, but, you know, in other ways of wording it. I was a bit disappointed with that. Because, you know, they're supposed to gain their memories back. But it just seemed like they didn't. Or else if it did, it was weird. Because they were having, like, flashback certain memories. Like, I'll get to them. But they just had certain memory flashbacks and not, like, everything come flooding back. Other than Ben, which is... yeah. And Ben's scene, as I said, he was at the library and he had his flood of memories back. And he actually had the scene with Pennywise at the library, where the whole, like, Pennywise was up on the second balcony talking down to him, and, like, people were getting splattered with blood and they weren't noticing. It's actually Ben's story, or like Ben's part. Whereas in the movie, the Tim Curry movie, it was Richie who had that scene. He was, I think it was right when he got there. And like the whole reunion thing in the movie is that Bill got there first, and he was with Mike, and they hung out a whole lot, and they slowly were coming by themselves, and were, I guess technically they're walking tours, but not really. So Richie went to the library, was asking for Mike, and he was out, and then the whole Pennywise fiasco went, and he's like, he yells at the librarian at the desk, is like, tell Mike I was here, and I'll be staying over here. And it's just a little, it was just surprising to find out it's actually, what I saw in the movie is actually Ben's story. Now, going with Richie had more of a, when they were talking at the reunion, they were talking about like kind of like their first experiences with it. And, you know, everyone thought that, I don't know if you can hear, but Lauren's complaining about the burn on her back. It's actually getting a lot better. It started peeling today. But anyway, everyone thought that Richie's first encounter was with the werewolf. I don't really remember what the new Richie's thing it was. But in the Tim Curry movie, his encounter was a werewolf. Regardless of like the movie, he saw the werewolf in the basement, whereas in the book, like in the basement of the school, whereas in the book he saw it in the basement of this old house. Regardless, everyone thought it was the werewolf with Ben. But actually he had an incident before that he thought was a dream, but actually it wasn't. And so we get to see it, and it's actually his first encounter with it. Now, he was getting chased by Henry and Victor and Belch, and that just happened all the time with them. But he was running and ditched them in like a department store's toy section, and just was running, and then he got to a place where he just sat down on a bench and was trying to relax. And he thought he was just basically hallucinating this, but there's this statue in their town of Paul Bunyan who's looking up, but then when Richie kind of opens his eyes, he's actually looking down on him. So that was when he was a child. And how that was brought back was, I gotta back up a little bit. At the luncheon, Mike said to go on walking tours and just follow your intuition. Follow where your intuition takes you. Because, you know, when you're kids, 80% of their lives are followed by intuition. So Richie's intuition took him to the place where he had that dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was his first encounter with it. And it was Paul Bunyan. And it was all Paul Bunyan when he was a child. But, oh, that broke. Okay, you stay there. I'm not going to touch you. That just snapped, I found out. So, as an adult, he's sitting there on the bench and like, oh, yeah, was that actually real? That had to have been real. No, it was a dream. And he's conflicting. And then Paul Bunyan comes alive again. Sort of. No. He doesn't realize it's like, he's there and he gets a breath of hot air on him and he looks up. It's Pennywise standing there, who is now terrorizing him. So, yeah, that happened. That never happened in the movie. I hope they put that in, you know, like, the second part of the new movie. Because that was actually kind of freaky. Not as... The scary part is coming up. It's later in this part. Like, the entire part, not this one chapter. But that was pretty freaky. The next part, was Eddie. And Eddie's took him to a place that he wanted to go, but he never did. He just heard all the stories. And it was this kind of makeshift baseball diamond back behind this building that was famous for these Tracker brothers. And so, like, they played baseball back there, and Eddie would want to play. And so as adult Eddie, he went back there and like remembered, and I think he actually saw this. So he never actually was able to play, but I think he was watching, and sometimes he pick up foul balls to give to like the pitchers and stuff like that. And so we all know Belch dies. So Belch is coming up over the fence, and that's not his scary thing, but he then turns into, like, he looks more like a leper. It's Belch, but he's like very leper-like. And then like two other people come in, and they're kind of like zombie-like, or like, yeah, zombie-like, like, yeah, I keep saying like way too much, but they come alive, and it's like, wow, that is really terrifying. Now I can't remember if Pennywise came in, but you know, we had the whole balloons. All of them had like balloons that were like, you know, we're gonna kill you, you're gonna die if you don't leave Derry. And it like, just, it was an unpleasant scene, but it was good regardless in its scariness, which is part of what you want to read. But that was probably the most terrifying out of all the walking tours, even though next is Beverly, and Beverly's scene was pretty much exactly how it is in the movie, except they're having tea in the kitchen and not in the living room. And in the movie this doesn't happen, but the house starts turning into the gingerbread house from Hansel and Gretel, cause like this table starts turning into chocolate, the glass doorknob on the front door turns into like pure glass, no, sorry, a pure sugar crystal as the door handle, and apparently the tea is actually poop or something like that. It wasn't in the beginning, but you know, then it just was like, it wasn't the best looking thing. Yeah. And the old woman was the same. She got those weird buttons on her front. I don't know if in the movie it turns into her father, but in the book it turns into her father, and that's just like terrifying. And he starts talking, and it is saying these things like in her father's voice of like, I wanted to rape you, I wanted to eat your cookie and not cookie, pussy, and all of that unpleasantness. Oh my god. Like, Eddie's was terrifying in like the zombie leper type of thing. Shut up, phone. Whereas, and like, I already hate zombies in the first place, so that's already terrifying enough. Beverly's, it's already unpleasant in the first place. But the fact that in the book it turns into her father, who's in this weird dress that the old lady was wearing, but regardless, he starts saying this stuff, and it's like, that is so unpleasant. That is like real life shit that happens, and it just made me sick. But you know, she gets out. Oh, no, that's just really, really unpleasant. And then Bill doesn't have anything scary in his part. He just, you know, he doesn't have anything scary. He's thinking about Georgie and his, you know, unpleasantness with that, but there's nothing really scary that happens. He thinks how do I say this? He meets a kid on the street on, like, where his old house was, and is like, can I try your skateboard? And he's looking at it, and he's on the street and looking at it, and it's just like, no, I'm gonna fall on my ass and break my back. So he says, you know, I'm a chicken, and just does the whole like, bawk, 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 bawk. And so he walks on, and then meets this little girl who is holding her doll by the hair, and I don't know why girls do that. It's just, I don't know. But he asks, like, where would I go to get something? And she's like, me or for everybody. And he's like, you. And she says the store called Secondhand Rose Secondhand Clothes. And so he meanders over there, and it's like this, basically a pawn shop. But he finds his old bike there. It's old, it's way older now. It looks, it's showing its age. But he buys it, and he has this is a pleasant moment of him finding his old bike, taking it over to Mike's, and okay, I goofed up. He does have a little scare, but it's the most minor scare of all. So they fix up, well, he fixes up his bike, and Mike pulls out a fresh deck of bicycle cards. Now apparently bicycle cards, especially if they're fresh out of the package, like you take off the cellophane of it, those cards, when putting on a bike, make them probably, it says, the most wonderful sound of a motor. So Bill has them in his hands and is like, I don't know what he's doing with them. He's doing something with them. But also in the book, it's apparently true that there's a special coating on bicycle cards, and especially fresh bicycle cards, and it makes them really slippery. So they slip out of his hands, and they're all blue, and they all end up face down except for two, and those two are face up, like they're face cards, and they're showing two ace of spades. Now that's physically impossible, especially after pulling it out of a fresh pack, taking the cellophane off and being all fresh and all that. So he picks them up, and it's like, well, this is really weird, and flips them over. One's blue and one's red. So, and then Bill says something along the lines of like, this is like fate or karma or the cosmic stars aligning. And Mike says, what are you gonna do with them? And it's like, I'm gonna put them on my bike. And so he does, and like, that's really the only really scary thing that happens. And then they have dinner, like they have like burgers and stuff, and they just talk, and like nothing really scary happens. And then that's the end of that chapter. The last chapter is probably the most interesting chapter of kind of like this whole book, and probably my favorite one, because it was also the most terrifying. Not in like a supernatural kind of way, but like a realistic type of way. So the first third of this book, this chapter is called 3 Uninvited Guests. Now in the movie it's technically only 2 uninvited guests, and I'll get to the third person as I'm saying this. So the first third of this book is all about Henry. Henry Bowers is alive and apparently has taken the blame for all the murders and the disappearances because of certain items in his room. And whatever he saw down there, he's like, fine, I'll take the blame, I don't care. All of this is some scary ass shit. And so there's a little more information, but the part that is shown in the Tim Curry movie is pretty much exactly what it is in the book. He's hearing voices from the moon. Yes, the moon. And then one night, either Belch or Victor, I don't remember who, is like this scary ass thing is under his bed. And they're talking, and you know, says like, I can't get out. There's all this security stuff, and they'll beat my ass if I try to. And and his friend is, his zombie friend, that's what it is. But he said he looks more like a Frankenstein, I just call him a zombie friend, says, don't worry, I'll handle it. So they go to leave, and one of the guards, and apparently this is the worst of the guards, is like, alright Henry, I'm gonna beat your ass, and stops short because he can see Pennywise, obviously, but it's not Pennywise's head, it's a Doberman's head. No, a pincer Doberman. And apparently that is the thing he's terrified of, and is basically killed by it. And Henry escapes. I also have to say that at the beginning of the reunion chapter, it's marked there at the top that says there is an escaped convict on the loose and he's still at large. And I was like, I know who that is. And it's just like, yeah, Henry escaped. So it was fine. I have nothing really to say about it because it was exactly the same. And it was like, I don't really care for Henry. I don't know what they're going to do about it in the new movie, because if you've seen it, hopefully you've seen it by the time this has gone up, but Henry and Mike were fighting in the area of where the well is, and somehow, you know, Mike pushes Henry into the well and he falls. And I remember distinctly that there was an audible crack. And he just, Henry just falls down the entirety of that well. And the other kids are, watch him fall from this little hole in the side of the well. So I don't know what they're gonna do about it, because you kind of need Henry. And, like, I'm pretty sure Henry is dead, according to the new movie, because I'm pretty sure his neck is broken from that really loud crack. And the way he fell, like, when you saw him, like, you saw, like, his, like, right here, it smacked against the wall of the well. And so, what's gonna happen? I'm, like, very curious, because you kind of need Henry as part of the book. But, is he dead? I don't really know. Second part is this brand new part, and this was the most scariest part of this whole part 3. Part 3? Part 4? Did I say? What was the number? Part 3, yes, it's part scariest thing in the world. We have a Beverly section where it's about her friend Kay and about Tom. Now, Kay is only in the first section because it's this whole chapter is broken up into like 11 parts. So the Beverly part, where we begin with Kay, I think only is either one long part or it's kind of like 2 parts. But the first part is Kay, and she's thinking about calling the police and debating about it, and she gets a call from Tom, and this is literally the day after Beverly has left. So technically she's already in Derry right now. And Tom calls and is like, in this like nonchalant, calm manner of, hey, Kay, do you know where my wife Beverly is? And Kay says, I don't know, I haven't seen her in 2 weeks. And Tom says, okay, and then like they hang up. And she's monologuing like, I was so stupid and stupid and stupid. She had a phone call from a florist and should have realized that it was Tom in a weird falsetto voice. And then opens the door and should have, kept the chain on. And as she was saying, get the fuck out of here, Tom, he punches her in the face. And he just lays it on her and is like, where the fuck is my wife? Where is she? Where is she? And Kay is doing her utmost best of like, I don't know. I don't know where she is. I'm keeping to the same story of like, I haven't seen her in 2 weeks. And then Tom goes on saying that when I called, you didn't even ask any questions of like, where is she? What's happened to her? And so that's why he came over, because he was curious as to why she didn't ask any more questions. Oh my god, my eyes. So he lays it on her and she tries to escape, but he is able to slip through this door that she's trying to close and punches her in the gut. Or, he just punches her. And then eventually he gets a vase and smashes it. And she realizes that, oh my god, he's going to cut me up. And he says something, it's like, oh my god, he's going to cut my face. And so she tells him that Beverly went to Derry. And then he goes on saying that, don't call the police. Even if you do, I will deny I was there. Because there's no maid here and there's no corroborating, like, all that, mumbo jumbo of like, you need evidence of like, this happened and I got beat up and all that. And like, even if he was taken to jail, he'll post bail and he'll be there in like the next few minutes to kill Beverly's friend, and just like, ugh. And so I think he asked her one more question and it's just like, yeah. And he leaves. And so, oh, she takes care of herself, like she goes to the hospital and comes home and just realizes she needs to inform Beverly, and she calls and just is like, tells the operator that her ex-husband is going to come and murder her, pretty much. And so, yes. Yeah. And that's the first part. The second part is we get to be in Tom's point of view. And, oh my god, Tom is insane. Like, seriously insane. And he's insane. He even gets to the point, like he even gets to the point of, well, when he's traveling, he's bought this car. He steals some plates from the long-term parking at the airport because he flew to Bangor. And he goes and buys a pack of cigarettes, and he's monologuing to himself like, oh yes, Beverly, I bought you a pack of cigarettes. And just, oh my god, this was the most terrifying section of all, except for, you know, like the part where, you know, where we meet adult Beverly, and that whole scene where, like, he's, oh my god, Tom is a bastard, he's insane, and deserves to die in the flaming pits of hell while being flogged and raped and having his skin stripped off his body while he's still alive so he can feel everything. Yeah, this guy's nuts and I don't like him. And then we have part 3, or yeah, part 3, and it's Audra. Now, this pretty much follows the same path as the movie, except we don't have the part where she's kidnapped by Pennywise. She might still, because, you know, it could happen in, like, the interlude here. It could be there, or it might be in the section where it's the second part with the adults, where, yeah, part 5, the ritual of Chewed, so it might be in the second part with the adults. Definitely not in the second part with the kids. So yeah, and yeah, it's pretty much the same and I liked it. I have no qualms about it. Just, you know, I still have the same feeling of like, this is kind of very winded. Stephen King, very winded, and just, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of his writing style. I will more than likely say this over again in like an overarching entirety of review. But part 3 was really good. It was, you know, following a lot from the Tim Curry movie. Yeah. Which is good because they put a lot of the book into the movie, and I hope they do that with the second part of the new movie. And I think I know how they're going to get away with killing Henry, is that because there's 3 invited guests and there's only 2 in the Tim Curry movie, they're probably just gonna have 2 in the new movie, and Audra is more than likely going to be one of them. But if they really killed Henry off, then they might do the whole Tom thing. I don't know, other than the fact that he's on his way to Derry, and, you know, all that stuff. I don't know if he's gonna even be captured, you know, by Pennywise, or if Pennywise is gonna get into his head and be like, you know, you're gonna go kill them, like he did with Henry in the book and in the Tim Curry movie. Oh god, this just, yeah, that was probably my favorite part of the entirety of it, because it was so scary. Like, I'm supposed to be scared, and the whole Henry thing and the Audra thing just wasn't all that scary. The luncheon, it was more towards the end where the scariness happened, so yeah. And then, I was pleasantly surprised that it was actually Ben's story that actually has Ben going to the library and having the whole Pennywise scene there. And I was just, you know, I was happy that basically Bill and Mike's had a similar thing going on with theirs, with the whole situation about them kind of having a more pleasant time and dealing with finding Bill's bike and fixing it and all that. It wasn't like perfectly in the book as a movie, but that's fine. Some of them, sometimes you have to take little liberties. And then the whole Beverly thing, it just didn't have, like, in the movie it didn't have the whole gingerbread thing, but I think the gingerbread thing was a nice touch that it would have been nice to see, and hopefully we'll see it in the new movie. And, you know, I was pleasantly happy with it being the same scene. But it was interesting to see what happened with Eddie and Richie. Eddie's was completely brand new to him, whereas Richie's, it was a flashback, which turned into his own thing, which is pretty cool. And I'd love to see it because, like, oh my god, a like 10-foot tall, no, 12-foot tall, because the statue itself was 10 feet and the little pedestal it stands on is like about 6 feet. So actually that would be 16 feet. It would be so scary to see, yeah, well, a 10-foot tall Pennywise of this new Pennywise, because he is so much more terrifying than Tim Curry. Like, holy shit. And there are parts in this book where like especially the luncheon scene where it's like I have the whole Tim Curry movie playing in my head and seeing those actors playing the scene. And the same thing of, yeah, just I'm just in my head. I have the Tim Curry adults in my head and just watching in my head all these scenes go out where they're playing them. It was really nice. Yeah. So it wasn't the most scariest. I think this, like, our adult scariness is gonna come in part 2. But yeah. So yeah. It was okay. Like, it was a decent section. I was happy with it just because it was following a lot with the previous movie, and that's all I have to compare it to. And yeah. Also, I was able to renew it, so I don't have to take it in tomorrow. I have it for the next 3 weeks. So I'll be able to finish this properly. And hopefully, because I actually did put a interlibrary loan on the last Samantha Jellicoe book. So hopefully I can finish this or get a good chunk of this read so that when I read the Jellicoe book it won't be like weird. So yeah, anyway. I am past the halfway point, thank God. Yeah, there are 9 parts. And Audra seemed to have like the most parts, sort of. Maybe? Yes? No? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I cannot wait for the second part of the kids because that is going to be, I'll be able to do some better comparisons and just see how I feel about it in book form, because I think I like the movies better just because it's less winded, and as I said, I'm not very happy with the way Stephen King, you know, writes his books. Not the fact of the story or the plot, it's his writing style. That's really what I have. So I will have the interlude maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Definitely not tonight. So I'll see you in my next clip. Hi everyone! So I just finished this part. Derry, the 3rd interlude. So actually it's not a part, I finished the 3rd interlude. And it was kind of the same as the 2nd interlude. It was kind of boring and I was kind of left flat. But we figured out that how Pennywise works is that something big has to awaken him, and then something big has to put him back to sleep, like the death of a large group of people. So in the 2nd interlude, it back in the 1929-1930s, it went back to sleep when the Black Spot was a black kind of bar hangout place that the African Americans, but at the time they were just referred to as blacks, were not welcome to any of the bars. They thought, you know, they were going, our whiteys thought they were going to just do bad things and all of that. So they basically had to make their own. And then the whiteys were like, wow, everyone really likes this place. We don't like that. We don't like that they like going there. And so they basically burned it to the ground. And that's how it ended. But the 3rd interlude was how we figured out was how it started. So this gang of bank robbers and murderers, technically, because they had a bank owner, or like the top guy at the bank who like works at the bank. I don't know what his title is, but he's a bank somebody. So they kidnapped him and ransomed him. They got their money, but then they murdered him in the end. And so they were holed up like maybe about 30 minutes outside of Derry, and they were low on ed, and in ammunition. So they came down to the only place where you could get bullets and all that stuff. And the guy said, I only can fill out half of your list, because apparently they wanted a shit ton of stuff. And so they had to come in the day after tomorrow, which was when I need come back in 2 days sort of thing. So basically, you know, these were some really bad guys, and the town decided, well, we're going to murder these guys. Well, we're just going to take them out. That happened, and then right at the end of this interlude, the guy who is telling the story to Mike said that they saw the clown right at the end. And he was explaining, like, oh, there's this fair that comes down around this time of year, and at the time, like, of this, you know, murder, or, well, sanctioned murder, that county fair was in full swing. So some of them thought he was just a person from town who didn't want to be recognized, or was just a person who was a clown at this county fair who, you know, heard about it and wanted to see it. But the way where he was in the shootout, because apparently he was shooting as well, was a little bit strange. And the two things were that it was 2:25 or 1:20, 2:25 in the afternoon, so it's high sun right there, and yet he didn't cast a shadow. And the second thing is, he was basically out to his knees, so he was technically floating. And that's how we figure out that is how Pennywise became active, and then, you know, started eating children just one by one, taking one at a time. And then the town of Derry, you know, decided to burn down the black spot, which actually burned a bunch of people in there. And then he went to sleep. So yeah, it was interesting, the fact that a lot of these people saw Pennywise. Not a lot of people, a few people saw Pennywise, and they're like, I'm not sure. But I think, like, Pennywise, like, he wants you to see you in, like, a quick flash of seconds, and then, like, you kind of put him out of your brain, at least in adult reasons. With kids, like, you know, you're stuck with him in your brain, and you're terrified of him, and all that. So the adults regard him as, like, a random person who doesn't want to be seen, or, you know, it's just a person who, you know, in a costume. But there's that one person saw him that had no shadow, and basically leaning out the window so far that he has to be floating for him to be in the position he's in. And, like, he's shooting down at... Okay then? I'm leaving this in for a little bit, but you probably just noticed that, it's gonna go back and forth between lights, but, apparently our power just cut out for a few seconds, or it was like a quick rolling blackout, because it was out for a few seconds, and now it's just come back on. So, this is great. Let's turn back on my TV. So, I'm gonna go and I'll continue this little weird thing in the back. Everything's kind of back. So, anyway, as I said, it wasn't as exciting. Just, it wasn't my cup of tea. It was just the last part, like literally the last page, which was actually this section, this page, and then this little bit. That was actually, I think, the most exciting for me from my reading. So, the interludes. So, I'm just gonna finish this up as fast as possible. Again, I think it's mainly because of the writing and the way Stephen King just wrote these things that I didn't really like interludes 2 and 3, but I really liked the first interlude, where it was actually more of a diary entry where Mike was, you know, talking about all of the stuff that's been happening and whether or not he should call them and that sort of stuff. But these last two, great, it's good. I like knowing backstory. You're probably thinking, like, what is wrong with you? You love all this backstory shit. Why are you having such a difficulty with that? It's the way Stephen King has written it is my problem. Yeah, so now I'm on to, what part am I on? Part 4. July of 1958. So we're getting to the section, the last part of the children's section, and yes, I know, but I don't want OneDrive, so, yeah. Sorry for this weird section, but, yeah. And I couldn't even finish it today because, like, problems, and it was just short. And yeah. I'll see you in my next part because I don't want to have to keep doing this! And I want to be done. Like, look. I was able to renew it from, like, I told you that in the last section, but I am very happy that I was able to renew it. But I have an interlibrary loan that's hopefully going to come in. Ah! First one problem. First world problems. Alright, so I have my next part of here, and it is part 4, July of 1958. So this is all about kind of the flashback of the things that led up to the main incident of the first time that they went and attacked it. And it played, as a bunch of the scenes played out as it had in the Tim Curry movie. So we have flashbacks. Where is this? Alright, part 4. Here we go. Okay, so first chapter of it, and it's called The Apocalyptic Rock Fight. Blah. So, at the beginning of each of those chapters, as you can see here, it's a bit italic, so all of that is the adults, and each of them is involved with a certain person. This one, who is this for? Okay, so the first chapter is Bill's, technically, and it follows his perspective, which doesn't have much to do in the way of, if I remember the chapter correctly, what happens in the movie. I don't really see a correlation there, or the similarities, but this was good. I don't have really much to say on the chapter, but, well, is it actually, okay, so, like, for some reason, it starts out in Bill's perspective, and then the actual chapter is actually in mainly Mike's perspective, and how the whole fight started is with Henry Bowers chasing after Mike, wanting to just basically pulverize Mike and destroy him. Yeah, I don't really have much to say. It was a decent chapter. All of them are pretty decent chapters, except for the Beverly one. Like, Beverly starts, like, we get the italics of, like, Beverly's as an adult, and then it goes into hers, and hers is talking about, mainly about the disappearance of a boy named Patrick Hockstetter. Yes, that's the boy's name. And it is creepy. Like, when we actually get to the point, it's like a third of that chapter, the last third. Holy fuck. This was never in the original. I kind of hope that they put a bunch of this stuff in the new one, because, like, this is just fucked up. That Patrick is, like, a psychopath. But he doesn't get time to become, like, murdering actual people. He just has been murdering animals, which is fine. So he has this abandoned refrigerator where he basically suffocates these animals, as far as I can tell. So he opens it up, his animal is gone, but there's all these, like, the larvae, and it turns into these weird fly mosquitoes. And I think they're like the mosquito beak things, like their needle heads are just slightly bigger, because apparently the holes that they make in your body can just produce all of this blood. Like, if you, like, they'll go into you, and if you whack them off, their body heads will explode, and it'll just start gushing, but the thing is still there in your body, so you have to yank it out, and then apparently there's a nice gaping hole, a nice little hole in the body. And eventually, a bunch of them wake up and cover his body. One of them gets into his eye, and another one gets on his tongue, and just, oh my fucking... Just reading it made me sick. It was gross, disgusting, and kind of perfect. Like, this is what I'm wanting to read in the book. Yeah. Because all the other chapters were not that terrifying. So, to the... I'm just gonna kind of review in regards to like how it compares to the video for both of them, because at this point the rock fight happens in both movies and they're pretty comparable. They both, you know, the fight starts and both groups are there, but in the movies it's kind of showing them that they're kind of kicking and beating up Mike already, like Henry and his group of friends, and the Losers Club kind of hears the noise and like comes out of the bush and it's like, oh my god! And that's how Mike, and like everyone stops, and that's how Mike gets up and gets over to the group. Whereas in this book, they don't really get a chance, but somehow Mike loses his shoe and he loses his shirt somehow, but he's the losers don't see him getting like kicked and beat up. That doesn't happen in the book. But I think it's an interesting thing that happens that they put in the movies, both of them. But Stephen King doesn't do it in the book. But they're both fine. I like both aspects of it. And then the next chapter is called The Album. Now this, whose point of view is this? I think? No, this starts with Mike. We start off with Mike because he goes into a room. Yeah, it starts off with Mike, and then I don't know how it starts into the next part, whose point of view is this, but we get to, this is part of the album, and I don't think it's in the new one, but it's definitely in the Tim Curry one, where Mike brings this album and says his father collects all of this stuff, like information about, you know, back then. And he has this really old picture, and it has Pennywise in it, and, you know, it's just a normal picture, and then it becomes alive. And then Pennywise sees the children and interacts with them in the scary way. It's decently scary in the movie, but in here, wasn't all that scary. And yes, I'm wearing a tube top. Not all that scary, so it was an okay chapter. Again, I don't really see it anymore. I don't know. I don't really remember this chapter well. It's just, I remember the basics and that, you know. Okay, so, next chapter is called The Smokehouse. And this is, so the first one was Bill's, the next one is Mike's. This one, the next one, is basically Richie's kind of point of view, like this plot line. So we start off with adult Richie, and he's basically talks about like, oh my god, I remember having a hallucinogenic dream where they find out that the Indians, or Native Americans, Aboriginals, like in Canada they're called Aboriginals, but they don't want to be called Aboriginals anymore. So I don't know what to call yourselves now. But they would do this thing where they dig a hole, they'd have like a little hole in the roof of it, but they'd be burning this like green wood to have a vision, that's what it is, to decide on about a fight and a bunch of other stuff that I can't really remember, but that's what happened in this chapter. It was interesting, and Richie and Mike were the only ones that were able to stand it, and those two had the vision, but it wasn't really a vision, it was, they got to see the past of how it came to Earth. They didn't really get to see what it looked like, but they saw like this burning ring of fire, this fire in the sky come hurtling down to Earth, and how it, you know, made a hole in the earth and all that stuff. And then they came out. And that's pretty old. That was an interesting chapter of like how they got to see it come to Earth, but not all that exciting. The next chapter after that is Eddie's sort of point. Now, none of the adult stuff, other than what happened with Mike. Mike went to go get a drink, like some more beer, so he opened a fridge, and that's where Stan's head was. Now that, in the book and in the movie, were almost identical. But in here, it only really happened to Mike, and he had to call everyone into the room where he was, whereas in the Tim Curry movie, he had a fridge at the circulation desk, and he opened it, and then so everyone was able to see Stan's head and had the whole conversation. But the situation of involving like Stan's dead head and all that happened, that was true. Everything else with the adults didn't, it's not really the same, where they're like, oh, I remember this flashback and all that stuff. But I liked how they're gonna be doing this in the new movie, like it's a second chapter where they're going to have the adults, but they're gonna have flashbacks. So I'm guessing to like these parts, because you know we already had in the first movie their first, you know, where the kids like interact with it. But in this one, like Eddie's chapter, Eddie is talking about how he broke his arm. Now it doesn't really have it in the Tim Curry movie at all, and I kind of wish they would, because this was really interesting. They have it in the new movie, but they changed how it happened. Like, it still happened. He broke his arm, and you know, he had to cast for like the second half of the movie, but in the book, how he got it was slightly different. And I kind of like, again, this was an interesting chapter, but not like, oh my god, this was like a really good chapter. That's Beverly's chapter. So Eddie finds himself alone with Henry and his group of people. So, you know, that's how he got his broken arm. Henry broke his arm. And yeah, but he also like did some more damage to Eddie other than just that, but breaking his arm was the major thing. So he ends up in the hospital. He's there for I think 3 days roughly, if I'm counting that right. If I'm wrong, doesn't really matter. But we get a part, because all the chapters are broken up into a certain amount of parts. So one of these parts was actually in his mother's point of view, and we got to see how kind of crazy she is, kind of nutsoid person that she is, and how she kind of made her son the way he is. And why she made her son the way he is because he got influenza. Yes, influenza when he was a child, and she was terrified of him dying, so she's just thinking of all the worst scenarios for her son to have happened in. And I'm just moving my position because my foot's going numb and it's a little annoying. So this was a really interesting chapter in how that all happened. Whereas in the new movie, Eddie broke his arm when he fell through the floor, the second floor, down into the kitchen of the Niebold house. And I don't see how he broke his arm just by doing that, but he did, and that's where he broke it. And then, you know, the first terrifying scene of it, and all that was just fucking terrifying. This, not so terrifying, but it was an interesting chapter of like how Eddie could have been a more, what's the word, independent character. He could have become a more confident person, and he could have not used his aspirator anymore, because he found out that, you know, he doesn't actually have, like, in here, he doesn't have the problem here. It's in his head, because his mother put it in his head that he needs an aspirator, that he has asthma. Yeah. So that was part of the interesting fact. That was really, it was really cool. I like that part. So yeah, that's the next part. And just reading his mother's point of view was one of the most interesting facts, because he's never done anything like that. He's done like maybe a paragraph of their parents in a certain situation, but it's just a paragraph, not a whole section. And the next chapter is called, so yes, this is Beverly's chapter. And as I said, this was the most terrifying one of all. It was the scariest one, for the fact that we kind of move away from Beverly's point of view and go to Patrick's. And, you know, we see him basically being killed by it. And I don't understand how it chooses his prey meal, but this was a, like, reading the other ones, like Georgie's was terrifying. And then the gay man's point, the gay man's reason. And then the other boy that was killed by the creature from the Black Lagoon. That was some terrifying shit. But this Patrick's, oh my live-loving lord, that was terrifying. It was scary, and I really don't want to read any more like that again, but I might have to. Well, actually, I will have to, because Beverly's husband is going to be here. He's going to appear in this section here. And, like, he is fucking nuts. He's a fucking psychopath. He may not be on the same level as what Patrick was turning into, but Tom, that's his name. Tom is a fucking psychopath. Like, he's insane. And whatever situation we get to involving him, he is going to just, it's going to be insane. So, oh my loving lord. And then we end off with Ben's chapter, and that's the chapter where we end up, you know, meeting it, like the kid's situation. And it's not the same. It's kind of weird. It's not the best. I don't really remember the situation of where the Tim Curry movie, I don't think they even had that in there, but if they did, I don't really remember. I guess it wasn't really that memorable. But the new one, oh my gosh, because I kind of had two incidences with it. The first one was in the Nebo house, and where Eddie had his arm broken, and I think that's where they kind of broke up. And in the situation of that movie, they had separated for a certain amount of time before they came back and, went to go destroy it, or for the first time. And that was actually really good. In the book, they go to the Nebo house, and they start in the basement, and there's no pipe in the basement. So they go up to this first floor. It doesn't really have a second floor, so they go to, I guess, the only bathroom in the house, and how they get there is really weird. It doesn't make sense to my architectural type of part of my brain. So they make their way to the bathroom, and apparently that's where it came out of when the first time the boys came to the house. Bill and Richie came to the house, and it destroyed the toilet, and that's where it came up and out of. And I pictured in my head this tiny bathroom, and this whole situation happening in a tiny bathroom. But the way it's written out, it's basically, it should be a larger bathroom. And I'm kind of a little disappointed, because I thought, the whole situation of, like, Beverly kind of gets separated and she gets entranced, or, like, taken by it, and, she gets entranced. But it's only the beginning. It's not as far along as other people's when they're taken. So Ben has, the time to go and kiss her and bring her out of her daze. That did not happen in the book at all. And in the book, it's like everyone's just yelling at her to kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. And I don't know, it just felt really anticlimactic. It didn't feel great. And also, Ben got hit with, got clawed by the werewolf situation. Like, it turned into a werewolf, and oh wow, you're focusing on that. Let's not try and focus on that. I actually really liked the situation in the new movie where, as I said, Beverly gets kidnapped, captured, and she gets entranced. Like, her eyes are like that dead eyes. And because, like, Bill was able to go in first, well, Bill went off first and got distracted because it turned himself into Georgie and pulled him away. And yeah, he, like, when he said, like, you're not Georgie, like, I'm not afraid of you, he turned himself into it, like, Pennywise. And I forget how this happened. How initially he got to the ground, but then everyone was, like, literally kicking him and, like, beating the crap out of Pennywise. I think somewhat like some. I think that was the situation where Beverly, like the new Beverly, like hit something on it, and like that was the initial, like it was scared, it was like shocked, and that's how everyone was able to beat on him, and then it kind of scurried away and just like went down even farther into the tubes. My finger hurts how I cut it. So yeah, I like the whole flashback part of this, and how like the stuff they did to lead up to the first, you know, like the like where how they were able to send it back into hibernation, because that's what happened. I really liked that, but I'm interested in and curious as to how they're going to be able to do that in chapter 2 of the new movie, even if they're even doing chapter 2, because sometimes that doesn't actually happen. I really hope it does, because this Pennywise is fucking terrifying. It's great. So I really hope they end up doing it and figuring out this whole, you know, flashback stuff going on. Right, because that would probably be the first half of the movie, and then the second half would be all this section here. More than likely with like Tom, you know, coming to terrorize them. Actually, it'd probably be like more like a 3-part movie, like within the second one. The first part is when everyone arrives, and it'll have the luncheon part, and then the middle part would be when they're at the library having the flashbacks and all that stuff, and then the last part will probably be like the stuff, you know, like killing the new it, well, killing it officially, and dealing with Tom. Oh my effing god. Oh, so yeah, I like this part, and now I get to read the interlude, which I don't know what that's gonna be like. It's gonna be weird. So yeah, I gotta go. I am really flippin' hungry, so I'll see you on the next part. Hey everyone! So here I am with part 4 of the interlude. Oh my gosh. Wow, this takes all of the whiteness away from me. There we go, a little. So yeah, I just finished part 4 of the interlude, and I started it yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, and I had like three pages left, because I read 3 pages today, and this was also quite boring. So 1 out of 4 interludes I found exciting, and that was the first one. This one talked about another part of how Pennywise was awakened, and this one was back in 1905, when something about they want to unionize, and this guy who was kind of crazy escaped this slaughter of his friends by these guys, and he disappeared for a while and then came back and killed them all, and when he was, well, all except one, and when that was done, he kind of just fell asleep on a table that he found these guys. I don't know, oh my god, my hair looks like this long, but it's like, for some reason there's fucking layers in my hair, and I don't like that. Anyway, so he basically fell asleep, and then he was arrested, and I don't know, I forget, it kind of glossed over how long he was in jail, but I think he was in jail for 1 night or something like that, and then a mob came and lynched him, and I think they lynched a bunch of other people, like they hanged him and a bunch of people. And that was how Pennywise, you know, woke up and had like a 2-year span, roughly a 2-year span of eating and killing people. So I really hope part 5, because there is a part 5 which is going to wrap up kind of a bunch of stuff, and then it goes into the epilogue. Yeah, so I was disappointed. Not that exciting. Other than, you know, I like knowing the history of a place and what, like how and why of certain things, but it was kind of boring. I don't want to read boring stuff, so yeah. In general, I kind of find the interludes kind of boring, except for the first part, but I still have to wait for part 5 of the interlude, or the 5th interlude, and then I'll have a real proper wrap up of how I feel about the interludes. And for a proper wrap up and review of the entire book, like, of the normal chapters, we'll have to wait till epilogue, right? It's an epilogue? Yes, it's an epilogue, which is Bill Deanborough. Deanborough. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Bill. Beats the Devil, Part 3. Yeah. I am getting into Part 5, The Ritual of Jude. And it's where, oh my god, we're going to have the climax of killing it. And, you know, finding out how, like, the whole, you know, Tom thing is going to get resolved, because, oh my god, he's insane and he's coming to Derry. And how I think they're going to interpret kind of like the villain of Chapter 2 of the new It movie. So, yeah. So, I'm gonna get reading my next part. So, I finished Part 5, The Ritual of Jude. And, so I forget most of what happened in this chapter. So I can't, no, not just chapter, this part. A lot happened in this part. And the reason why I believe I can't remember much is because Stephen King went back and forth from the kids version to the adult version of when they, how does this chapter start? Alright, and then 7, 9, okay. Oh, what? Excuse me, seriously? Okay. So, where do we start? 9/11. Wow. The first chapter starts at 9/11. Wow, that's a number. Alright, so we start Part 5. Yes. Again, I'm gonna do this. Yes, Part 5. We start that. Use that to bookmark it. Just when they're finishing their talks in the library. And they go off different directions, but apparently end up back at the Terrytown house. This last hotel is in Derry. And it follows the basic path of, like, this whole part is revolving around when they go back to the hotel and up to the point of when they finish it. So that's literally the entire night. Yes, because they finish this conversation about 1 in the morning, and then they get down into the sewers about 3 in the morning, just after 3 in the morning. So the Henry Bowers situation was literally the same, except for some little tidbits in there that weren't put in the movie. Like, okay. There's a lot of stuff that happens in this book that wasn't in the Tim Curry movie, and I'm looking at my hair and it's really annoying the frick out of me. I'm sorry. I'm getting distracted. Like, look at this. Like, it doesn't even match the same length as... Oh my gosh. So okay. Because I can't remember all this, I was happy with the stuff that actually happened, that they took from the book and put it in the movie. I was very happy about that. There's nothing that changed, so I'm a little concerned about the new one, about what they're gonna do with that. And I found it very annoying going back and forth between the child versions of them and then the adult versions of them. And then we also have Henry's point of view, but that stops about first chapter, right? Yeah. First two chapters 1 and 2 of this part, because he goes and hurts Mike. I can't remember in the movie how Mike gets hurt, but Henry Bowers does this in the book, and Mike's alone, and he's by himself in the library, and everyone's left. And then in chapter 2, he's at the hotel now, where he does hurt Eddie, and that's the same thing in the movie. So I was very happy about that they kept. There's a lot of stuff that they kept. But there are some things that I'm not happy about that Stephen King did that I'm glad they didn't put in the movie. Which is the fact that Bill cheats on his wife. Why would you do that? Like, you kind of know it's a bad thing, and yet, like, oh, I actually, you know, we have feelings for each other, and I always wanted to do that. But then we get into a later part of the book where we find out, as children, while they're still in the tunnels trying to find a way out, well, apparently they feel like, you know, we're all drifting apart, there's nothing keeping us together. And then Beverly says, how about you all fuck me? Yeah, so she strips naked and they all fuck her, and well, she and Ben have a moment. Like, it was a detailed moment that Stephen King wrote out. And then she kind of has a moment, a minor moment with Bill, I mean, sorry. We already had that big moment with Ben. And then we have kind of a minor big moment with Bill. All the others were just, they were uncomfortable and whatnot. But, yeah. Why? That makes no sense, okay? That makes no sense that she would want to do that when she's not that type of girl, and first off, that just doesn't make any sense to her character at all. So, why do that in the first place? But, once we get actual blah, 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 so, we move from the Mike, they never see Mike again until they never see it in this part, but I think they do in the last interlude and the epilogue. I don't know, I haven't read those things, so, yeah. But they don't see Mike again after they leave the library, which is a little sad, but when Beverly's talking on the phone to the police, and the police are there at the library, they're like questioning her, but they understand from, I don't know what Mike said, because Mike's told us about when something happens, either people completely ignore it, or they all go batshit crazy and they're like, we gotta murder some people. So that stuff's already happened again, because this is kind of the closing of its like cycle. So it's technically, it has to have a big thing happen for it to go back to sleep, according to lore here. So it wants to kill the Seven. It's already killed Stan inadvertently, like Stan has remembered all this stuff and it's like, no, I ain't dealing with that shit again, and goes and commits suicide. And then he tries to do that with Mike, which happens, and then, you know, the other 5 of the kids who go actually into the tunnel, which it is that same group of 5 of them that goes down the tunnel. Beverly, Bill, Ben, Richie, and Eddie, they all go down to the tunnels. Again, as I said, I like the consistency, which is great. And what's next? Oh, yeah. As Beverly's on the phone with the police, they start getting really suspicious of her, and they never see him. Whereas in the movie, I like that they actually go see him and they talk to him, and then like later that day, they literally go into the tunnels, or like they go into the sewers and whatnot to go fight this thing off after talking to Mike to find out what happened to him and make sure he's okay. And as I said, Henry goes and attacks Eddie, which is the same in the movie as they took from the book. But Eddie doesn't get help for his arm in the book as he does in the movie. I wish they did, but I understand why they didn't, because, you know, if they got caught by the police would be like automatically, oh, you're gonna be in jail, and then you're stuck in jail, and then the town is just gonna murder you all and whatnot. You know, they merrily go along down tunnels. With the kids and Henry Bowers coming after them in the tunnels, it kind of follows more of the Tim Curry version than it does with the new version. The new version kind of changes it, where Henry murders his friends and then goes by himself. He has a fight with Mike, and then somehow Mike pushes him down to the tunnel, and I'm pretty sure Henry's dead by his neck breaking, like him hitting against the side of the wall of the well. So as I said, I'm wondering how we're going to do the next movie where Henry's dead. So there's that. Yeah, I thought it was okay. They didn't really ever interact with them, as I know in the Tim Curry movie they kind of do. They kidnap a kid, and then they're in this one room, but then it comes through this tunnel, and it's like a big bright white light, and basically takes off Henry's friends. And no, as Henry is staring at it, it causes his hair to go all white. Which is, I think, a very interesting thing that happens, that his hair goes white as he stares at it. It doesn't happen in the book. I think that's a cool little tidbit they add in the movie. But it's not gonna happen in the new one. It didn't happen. So, again, as they merrily go along, and they get really, really dirty in these tunnels because they're actually walking in poop sewage. Yes, poop sewage. That's yucky. And nothing really big happens. Like, it's like same thing in the movie. I guess the really big thing that does happen with the kids is that this eye comes, like, the Richie is afraid of this like goopy tentacly eye, and then the bird, Mike's bird, comes around, and then Georgie comes around, but they weren't all that exciting. I think with the new movie they pulled the whole Georgie thing for that part, which, you know, it's good consistency, but it's also not the same at the same time. I like it when they have more consistency that they take from the book instead of like revamping it. But I really did like the new movie. With the adults, nothing happens until we get to the It door, and it's the same thing as they see in the Tim Curry movie when they're adults. It's only in the adults section of that movie where they see this door, and it's the size of like about what you would suppose for like a fairy tale. Like, it's kind of a smallish door that basically everyone has to crouch down and crawl through this door. But apparently they all see something different. There's a symbol on it, and we don't know we know what it looks like because it's shown in the book, but as far as I remember, we don't know what it means except for what each individual person like sees on it. And again, that's not really anything different or exciting. So then we actually get into the room where they see all this gossamer webbing that if you touch it, you go numb. And the kids, they see all this, the people that, you know, it, you know, like took in there and has been eating them and whatnot. Some of them are kids, some of them are adults, mainly kids, and, you know, that's gross and disgusting. And this is a little where it starts to pick up. This is when a lot of the action starts happening for both the kids and the adults. You know, what the adults see are the same, like, gossamer webbing, but they don't really see a lot of people except for Audra, because that's the same as from the movie, which is very nice. But she gets kidnapped by Tom, and we don't hear from them again until we get to its lair, and Audra is hanging from the ceiling on this web, and she's unconscious. And then Tom is actually dead on the floor because blood has come out of every orifices. Like, you know, we already know that it came out of his nose, maybe some from his ears and whatnot, and maybe a little of his mouth because, like, you know, gets hit in the face. But, you know, it's coming out of his eyes now. So, he's dead. So, yeah. How are we supposed to have, you know, like a side villain in the new movie when Tom is dead when you get to its lair in the book? I hope they kind of rearrange that and make it so that, you know, Tom is like, you know, he sees them, but he's kind of sneaking around them. Oh my god, I am fascinated with this thing here. I am sorry. So as I said, once they get into the lair, both the kids and the adults, a lot of it picks up, and it starts getting my emotions picked up, which is really good. And besides that, we have like, on at least 3 times, maybe 5, I'm not 100% sure, but at least 3 times, we get into the mindset of it. It actually has a section of like its monologue talking about like they've hurt me, they're coming after me, and like, oh no, they're killing my babies, because when they're adults, they find out that it's been producing babies. Yes, it is a female! Yeah, that's a thing we didn't know in the movie. Oh, I just lost that. Oh, okay. Anyway, so we have like some it monologues, which is an interesting fact. It's interesting to listen to it, and the way Stephen writes it is a little weird, but it's interesting. And then we also get parts of what's happening outside, like in Derry, like what's happening to Derry as this is going on. And that was really exciting, like the fact that those are the only 2 things that I thought were exciting, were what's happening outside to Derry, and this, because this huge storm is coming and there's really insane winds, and it's basically, these people outside of Derry are saying that it's a location-based hurricane that's happening, tornado, all this stuff is happening. They're having what actual, not the news people that are printing the news, but actual people, like citizens, say like this, that we were having earthquakes all over the place and all that. Like, it was being destroyed, and like a lot of people died in this, and this all was happening in the adult time. And the kid, let's go back to the kids' time, because not super exciting as the adult one, but still very interesting. So they do the whole ritual, and the ritual that Stephen King found for Chewed was that you bite your opponent's lip while at the same time they're biting your lip, and you're having to make jokes. But that's not how they're doing it with it itself. They're like mentally biting each other's lips and just not being afraid of it, or like fighting this fear of sorts. Like, Bill kind of overcomes his stutter somewhat. Like, he chooses to make his voice deeper and become a character, not of himself, so that he's able to do this. And it's interesting. Like, the whole interaction between the two of them is kind of interesting of what happens, and it takes Bill's essence inside his body and launches it, apparently, to go into the macroverse. And his body is still there, you know, like there, that, you know, it apparently, I guess that's how it eats bodies and whatnot. Yeah! And then Bill meets the turtle, and the turtle talks to him and tells him kind of how, he tells him in a roundabout way of how to defeat it. And then somehow Bill is flung back into his body, and they hurt it, but as it's running away, all the kids are saying like, we gotta leave now, it's hurt, it's gonna die off, and all that such. So it's completely different than what happens for the new movie of how, like, you know, they're taking care of it. Sort of, like, they're choosing not to be afraid of the thing that is making them scared, or making them have anxiety, or have like bad doubts about themselves. Like, for Bill example, it comes out as Georgie and says in Georgie's voice that Bill is the one who sent him off to be killed, it's his fault, blah blah blah. But it's not Bill's fault, because he didn't know about it until he kind of saw it. And so Bill owns up that's like, he's been blaming himself this entire time for Georgie's death, but it's not his fault. He just wanted Georgie to go and have fun. He just wanted him to have fun. So, and then all of a sudden they're all kicking it, so it's a little bit different. And then about like a few minutes later, that's when the whole, oh guys, we're gonna drift away, so, you know, come fuck me and we'll be closer together. And I have no idea where the context of that comes in, because it just doesn't make sense. And then, actually, I'm gonna say the last part of this part of part 5, because this is part of the last chapter and the last numbered section, where Stan is actually the one who breaks the Coke bottle, picks up a piece, and then, like, he's the one who starts cutting, like, both palms of their hand, both palms. And then it kind of flows into, like, the normal thing. So, yeah, that was kind of interesting. But, as the adults, oh my loving lord, a lot more happens. So Bill does the whole thing again, but apparently he misses biting him, and, you know, he's sent off, and somehow he's able to call into back into our universe, because somehow he's in the macroverse. And Richie is the one who hears him, and so Richie comes and mentally bites it, and is in the macroverse and fighting him. And he's able to get a good latch on him and save Bill. Like, they almost get off. Or, as they're escaping, Richie kind of loses his hold on it, or like he's losing it. And so Richie is losing his hold on it, and he calls into our universe again and be like, hey guys, we need help. And somehow Eddie figures out that they need help, or actually it's, no, Beverly, I don't know. Eddie figures it out, and he goes and does the whole using his aspirator again, because he does it in the Tim Curry movie. I don't know if he does it in the new one, but he goes and attacks him with his aspirator, and as he's doing this, like, he's hurting it, but then Eddie loses his arm in the process. His good arm, not the one that Eddie Bauer destroyed. Yeah, that's happening. And it's true, in the Tim Curry movie he dies, which is kind of sad. But Bill and Richie get back into their bodies, and it is hurt and is running away to go and hide again. But Bill says, we have to go kill it, we have to go. And so Richie is like, yeah, we gotta go. And they take Bill along with them. And all this time, Bill hasn't even seen that Audra is up in the webbing. And then he's like, oh my god, I see her. I see Audra. Oh my god, I gotta rescue her. She's like, no, she can stay there. And then, like, you know, like, all this stuff is falling and being destroyed. And all this stuff was being destroyed as kids, but I forgot about that part. So all the webbing is coming off, and Beverly stays with Eddie, trying to save him, trying to keep him alive, but, well, he doesn't exactly make it, which is sad. So, Bill, Ben, and Richie are running along, and they see all these eggs, and they're like, oh my god, definitely a female. She's been giving birth. But he said, like, one of the, I forget whose point of view we're in, but one of them says that she's been miscarrying. These are miscarriages, but they're not miscarriages if the thing is still is alive in the body. But it also mentioned that she's just been dropping them. She hasn't been placing them. So I don't really kind of understand the context of that. Like, they're still alive in their egg, yet they're a miscarriage, and she's, I don't know. But Ben is elected to stay behind and kill all the eggs, which he does. So Bill and Richie are running off to confront it. And at this point, this is when we get one of its point of views, which is pretty interesting. It's like really dying now, because it's not just like kind of internally that it's been wounded. There's a gaping hole in its side, and this whole point. And this whole time, it's been in the facade of a big, hairy spider, which is why all this webbing is, because that's what, apparently, our brains are the only thing that we could think of that is close enough to its real shape. And, like, again, the same, it's in the kids' version, but I'm talking about the adult version because this is the heart-pumping of all. So, Bill and Richie are confronting it and actually punching it now. And somehow, Bill, like, kind of does a linebacker, and he makes a hole. And then he's kind of shoving his arms up in it. And at one point, Richie gets knocked out. Like, it has hit him, and it's thrown him against the wall, and, you know, kind of unconscious. And Bill is hearing this thumping, and we find out it's the thumping of the heart. And so he's trying to find it. He's getting all this. Stephen King calls its blood Inchor, Inchor, Inchor. I don't know how to pronounce it, but, like, why would you call it that? It's just, you know, a weird black blood. You know, it's blood, and a weird different alien blood. Anyway, so he's going to find the heart and kill it, and, you know, he squishes it inside the body and, you know, is dead. And I'm pretty sure the whole taking out its heart happens in the Tim Curry movie, but they slightly changed it because Bill, Richie, and Eddie, no, I don't know, the three of the boys, I know it's Bill, there's Bill in there, they get caught in its, like, deadlights, and they're kind of just staring at it. And so Beverly, she acquires one of their silver slugs and uses the, I can't even remember what it's called, and it's in the book. She uses their weapon and is able to technically hit the heart, so that's how that's killed. And I like what happens in the book a whole lot better. It was causing me anxiety, like a good anxiety of like, oh my god, this is exciting, oh my god, what's gonna happen to them? Oh, they better get, oh my god. So that was fantastic. And you got overheated, and I have that on, and this is off, so I don't know why you overheated. Anyway, oh my god, it was so good. And then, so they get Audra, they get Eddie, and they're leaving, but because Eddie is, you know, officially dead, and I'm picking my finger, I need to stop, they decide to leave him there, which is very sad, but he's dead. He can't really help. So they take Audra, and then they find out that Derry has just been destroying itself. And so they find a hole where the theater was, because that's collapsed into the ground. And then they climb out of that hole, and yeah. Oh, it was great. Like the end, like the last chapter was the best one, which is actually it's the last 2 chapters, because there's 5 chapters. The last 2 chapters were the best thing in the world because they got super exciting. And Richie flags down an ambulance, getting Audra to the hospital because, I don't know, get fluids in her, pumping her. But we all know, if you've watched the Tim Curry movie, we're not done! And also, we're not done with the book because there's still an interlude and there's an epilogue. So, yes, oh my god, this was some exciting shit that happened, and I'm also excited for this to be done. Like, I've got this much left, and that's two chapters technically that I still have to read. So, oh my god, I am excited. Also, you notice I got my new stuff. I got my new other bookcase. So this, I'll do a, I don't know what I'm gonna do because you probably will overheat, and I'm gonna get going. Hi, I just finished the last interlude, like literally that is what it's called. The last interlude, and I just lost my page, but I'm on the epilogue, so the last chapter. And this interlude was just kind of recapping us with Mike, and just is meh. Yeah, really the only chapter I liked of the interlude was the first one, so 1 out of 4 I liked. That's not all that great, but oh well. They're okay, and like this one was just wrapping everything up and just, you know, that's all. Explaining that Richie went back to California right away. Beverly and Ben are taking some time together, you know, ending up together. Oh, and I have, I'm playing Fallout right behind you, and Dogmeat is lying down staring at me, and it is the cutest thing in the world. Yes, I'm playing Fallout, and I'm not recording it because of reasons that I will explain at a later point. But in here, yeah, I didn't really like it, so that's all. I got 1 chapter left, and hopefully it'll be more exciting. And then I will do my official all recap of It by Stephen King. Hi everyone! So, I have finally finished It by Stephen King. It is now, I'm pretty sure I have a bunch of parts, which I can actually put the date on. But today's date, and yes, I'm in Manny's room, I finished it, is August the 3rd that I finished this flippin' book. Okay, it is so long. I have read apparently giant books like this. I've read, what is it? One of the Harry Potter books, and that was huge, okay. And then I read the last 2 books of the Unicorn Chronicles, and those were decently big, but this is bigger than that, and it's 1 book, like, yeah. So the last chapter is all about Bill waking up Audra, and it pretty much follows the same thing as in the Tim Curry movie, which I'm happy about it. But Stephen King does it again, where he starts splitting up the story. Like, he adds this dream that Bill had later, and it just, I don't like it. It takes me out of reading what it's about, like this chapter is about, and it's just all of that really got annoying when reading this entire book. But it doesn't really happen in the beginning, but it does happen a lot in the second half of the book, which, yeah. So, how I feel about this book. This book was quite interesting, and I did like it. And I like the fact that from watching the 2 movies, they pulled from the book, especially the Tim Curry movie. They pulled a lot from the book, whereas the new one, they've they pulled some of it. They have rearranged some of the things and did new stuff. Like when they, in the book, when they go fight it the first time, when they go to the house, in the new one, they change some of the stuff that happens, like especially at the end, where they have this fight and they don't talk to each other for a good while. But that doesn't happen in the book. So, yeah. So my overall feelings about this book, as I said, I somewhat enjoyed it as, you know, finding out new stuff that wasn't in the movies, but overall, it's not a book for me. I did not enjoy when Stephen King started doing the whole back and forth thing. I did like the chapter, or the part, I can't remember if it was a part or a chapter, but that section of when it literally is the adults having, you know, talking about like flashbacks. Like when, actually there's three kind of separate chapters. Like the first one is when they go to the luncheon and they have their own kind of sections of, like, they're talking to the people and then they tell about, oh, I have this memory which I can tell you about that I just remembered. And then there's the part or the chapter when they leave and they each go to certain spots and they have certain things happen. They kind of remember certain things. Like especially Eddie, he remembers he used to go to this baseball diamond behind this store or building where the kids used to play baseball and whatnot. And that, it wasn't full on flashbacks, but they were starting to remember stuff and I'm touching my hair because it's stupid. And then when they get to the library, they have new flashbacks of sorts. So a lot of that makes sense. Like they talk about the adult, like he talks about the adults at one point and what they're doing and talking, and then he goes to certain stuff that, you know, they remember, like newer stuff that they remember and talking about that kid stuff. But then after, it's when he starts talking about them getting into the caves and how they get into the cave, it's very frustrating. Like it just kind of seemed pointless. I wish it would just do the kid, he had done the kids and then he went to the adults, because yeah, I just wish he had done that. That's really, actually that's one point. That's the one point. The other part is that I don't like his writing style, the way he writes a lot of the stuff. It irks me a lot of how it was written. And then, you know, I only liked the first part, the first interlude, and then I didn't like the other four. So overall, I'm not reading this again ever, for the fact of it's a long, really long ass book. 2, I don't really like reading horror books and it's kind of a scary book. I don't really want to read that. And then 3, it's just, I don't like when he goes back and forth way too much, which is just very unpleasant. So yeah, that's all I had to say for this book review. This is a long ass book review and I'm sorry that, for one, it took so long to read. 6 weeks. 6 weeks it took me to read this book practically. Well, 5 and a few days. 5 weeks and a few days. And I'm just sorry. There are so many parts and some of them are really, really long. I'm sorry about that, but I didn't want to forget a lot of the stuff, but I forgot a bunch of stuff that happened when they were in the tunnels and how I felt about it and all that jazz. But yeah. So I'm not going to be reading this again, as I said. But you can read it if you want. The only reason I would recommend it is, 1, you like horror stuff. It is pretty scary what happens, and the descriptions of the description Stephen King gives, and just the fact of the story is, like, some of those parts are scary. And it terrifies me, and even especially the real life stuff, the stuff that happens between Beverly and Tom, like, oh my god, shit, that, you know, that's scary. I said all that stuff. So that's really the only reason I recommend it. The other is, if you have watched the Tim Curry movie and the new movie, that you probably may want to read it, because there is stuff that they don't put in the movies. Like the Tim Curry movie. Tim Curry is very, as close as you can get, but they do leave some stuff out because like you can't put everything in the movie. And then with the newer version, which is chapter 1, well, they rearrange a few things, so, and they redo certain things. So with the whole, you know, in the new one, they basically killed Henry Bowers in the first one, so they need a new villain to do some damage to, you know, Eddie and Mike, because that's a big thing about the book, is that Eddie gets his the same arm damaged and has to be put in a sling, and Mike gets severely hurt to the point where he has to be taken to the hospital. So the only person I can think of that would make sense is to make Tom the villain, because I thought Tom was going to be a big part of the story, but it literally kills him, and then like we don't find that out until they get back into adult. We don't find that out until the adults get into its cave, and we see that, oh, Tom's dead. Like the only point of Tom being in this story, other than to abuse Beverly, is to kidnap Audrey and bring her to the cave, and that's all he's good for. I hope he has a bigger role in the new movie, just because we don't really have a villain other than it, and even though it is the whole story, it can't interact with a lot of stuff of the story, so I think that's why it uses Henry as sort of like a substitute, or like he uses Henry in some ways, so I'm pretty sure he's going to be using Tom in the new one. I just hope they actually come out with it, because sometimes when people make a movie and it's supposed to be like in some kind of series of sorts, nowadays it doesn't really get fulfilled. Most of the 50, let's just say like 50% of the time, let's say half the time, it doesn't come to fruition. So yeah, this is my book review. I want to end it because I just want to stop talking about it, okay? I want to stop talking about it. So if you liked this long ass review, please hit that like button. If you love my torture and are like, you've suffered enough, have some likes. And tell me in the comments below how you feel about the It book, and how you feel about the movies, like the Tim Curry one and the new one, and how you feel about all that stuff. And probably by the time this gets uploaded, then chapter 2 might be come out, so you can put your feelings about chapter 2 in the comments below as well. And if this is the first time you're watching my videos, please hit that big red subscribe button down there by my picture for more book reviews. Hopefully none that take this flippin' long. Hauls, let's plays, unboxing, unbagging, something's coming in a bubble wrap, manila envelope, or a plastic bag wrap thingy, vlogmas, random vlogs, and random videos. I have no idea where to categorize. Alright. Oh my god, sorry, I put in other books that I got. So I got my interlibrary loan. I got it on Tuesday, and I thought I was gonna finish it, but no, I finished it Friday. So here's my new book, A Touch of Minx by Suzanne Enoch. And this is the 5th and last book in the Samantha Jellicoe series. This is really great because I have antimonity, as you know, and I really want to read that book. So let's read the back so I can end this book review. Who says crime doesn't pay? A year ago, Samantha Jellicoe robbed from the rich and gave to herself. Now, though, she's using her L-A-R-C-E-N-O-U-S, Larcarious, I don't know that word, skills for good as a private security consultant, trying to walk the high road for her sexy billionaire boyfriend, Richard Addison, and asking herself if there's anything more torturous than tracking down priceless artifacts, only to give them back. So when the Metropolitan Museum of Art asks for her help, she's only too happy to leap into the fray again. If nothing else, this adventure will help her avoid that little sparkly item Rick's been hiding in his pocket, and postpone another kind of walk down the aisle. Oh, he's proposing to her! Oh my gosh. But she's trying to avoid it because she's not the commitment type of person. But she kind of is becoming that. It's only when she's targeted by a deadly adversary after the same treasure that Sam starts to think that till death do you part is maybe the lesser of two evils. Okay, that last bit of sentence did not make sense to me, and I probably wasn't saying it that made sense. So, yeah. Ooh, good body picture right there. Oh, you can't see that because I don't have great lighting in here. Sorry, guys. He tilted his head at her. What? Just taking you in, she said with a smiling sigh. You look good with that sexy, crazy bed hair and the stubble. Does it feel like we've known each other for a year? Richard shook his head, feeling his heart beating all the way out to his fingertips. Sometimes it feels like a day. That first day. Electric. Yeah, electric. We do have the sparks, don't we? As he came downstairs 20 minutes later, he hummed Rural Britannia. That amusement stopped as the front door bell rang. He paused on the landing while Ronaldo appeared to pull open the door. Good morning, detective, the housekeeper said, stepping back. Homicide detective Frank Castillo of the Palm Beach Police Department sauntered into the foyer, looked up to see Rick, and gave a half wave. Good morning, Rick. Is Sam around? Another thing his life had become since he'd met Samantha Elizabeth Jellicoe. Chock full of surprises. Well, this is the last book, and it should be the most exciting one because they're gonna get married! Maybe not exactly get married in this, but he's proposing to her. Oh my god. So, last book in the series. This is exciting. Hopefully it is as exciting as some of the other books have. I think there's only been 2 that haven't been so exciting, like the first book. And I think the third book, I don't know, 2 of the books haven't been super exciting, but the other 2 have been really exciting. Hopefully the last book is going to be a renowned success. I don't know. I gotta go. I'm talking gibberish, so I hope you liked this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye, guys!